In the glittering halls of Ashbourne Manor, the priceless star of Seraphine diamond vanishes from a locked case during a grand gala, sparking a web of deception. Hercule Poirot, with his razor-sharp mind, unravels a maze of clues. A mysterious clink, a torn letter, a jeweler's glove, and a cursed legend, exposing smugglers, conspirators, and a loyal butler driven by fear. As secrets unravel, Poirot sets a cunning trap, revealing the thief and restoring the gem in a thrilling tale of greed and truth. Chapter 1. The glittering gala, the grand ballroom of Ashbourne Manor, shimmered under the glow of a dozen crystal chandeliers, their prisms casting rainbows across the polished marble floors. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and expensive perfume mingling with the faint tang of champagne that fizzed in flutes held by gloved hands. It was the event of the season, the annual gala hosted by Lady Evelyn Ashbourne, a widow of considerable wealth and impeccable taste, whose invitations were coveted by London's elite. Tonight, however, the true star of the evening was not the hostess nor the illustrious guests, but a gem, a diamond so rare and radiant it was said to hold the light of 1,000 stars. The star of Seraphine. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian, detective with a mustache as precise as his mind, stood near a gilded column, his sharp eyes scanning the room. He had accepted Lady Evelyn's invitation not for the allure of high society, though he appreciated its theatricality, but because she had hinted at a matter requiring his unique talents. "Monsieur Poirot," she had written in her elegant script, "your presence would lend me great comfort, for I fear a shadow looms over this joyous occasion." Poirot, ever intrigued by the vagaries of human nature, could not resist. He adjusted his perfectly knotted bow tie and sipped his glass of sparkling water. No champagne for Poirot, who preferred clarity of mind. The ballroom was a kaleidoscope of movement. Women in shimmering gowns twirled to the strains of a string quartet, their laughter rising like bubbles. Men in tailcoats exchanged murmured confidences, their eyes darting to the centerpiece of the room. There, on a velvet-draped pedestal, encased in a glass dome reinforced with steel, rested the star of Seraphine. Its facets caught the light, sending beams dancing across the walls, each sparkle a silent siren call to admiration, and perhaps to avarice. Poirot's gaze lingered on the diamond, but his attention was drawn to the people orbiting it. Lady Evelyn, resplendent in a sapphire gown that matched her eyes, stood near the pedestal, her smile gracious but strained. At 52, she retained a youthful elegance, though fine lines at her eyes betrayed a life not untouched by sorrow. Her husband, Lord Reginald Ashbourne, had died a decade ago, leaving her the manor and a fortune rumored to be dwindling. Tonight she played the perfect hostess, but Poirot sensed unease in the way her fingers tightened around her fan. Beside her stood her nephew, Roger Ashbourne, a handsome man of 30 with a disarming smile and eyes that never quite met those of his interlocutors. His tailored suit was impeccable, yet Poirot noted a slight fray at the cuff, a sign perhaps of financial strain beneath the polished exterior. Roger laughed too loudly at a joke from a portly banker, his hand gesturing toward the diamond, as if to draw attention to it or away from himself. Across the room, Lord Harold Ashbourne, Lady Evelyn's brother-in-law, cut a stern figure. His silver hair and rigid posture spoke of a man accustomed to command, though his scowl suggested displeasure at the frivolity around him. Harold, a retired diplomat, had returned to England only recently, and whispers among the guests hinted at a falling out with Lady Evelyn over the estate's management. He stood alone, nursing a glass of brandy, his eyes fixed on the diamond with an intensity that piqued Poirot's curiosity. Then there was Madame Isabella Valenti, the opera singer, whose voice had captivated Europe's grandest theaters. Her crimson gown clung to her like a second skin, and her dark hair was swept into an elaborate chignon adorned with a single ruby. She moved through the crowd with the grace of a panther, her laughter musical but calculated. When her eyes met Poirot's, she offered a slight nod as if acknowledging a fellow performer on the stage of life. Poirot knew of her reputation, not only for her arias but for her entanglements with powerful men and, some said, less savory circles. The quartet struck up a waltz, and the room swirled into motion. Poirot remained still, his mind cataloguing. Details. The butler, Mr. Collins, whose impeccable service belied a faint tremor in his hands. Clara, the young maid who darted between guests with a tray of canapes, her eyes wide with nervous energy. Mr. Grayson, a jeweler with a reputation for discretion who lingered near the diamond's case, his fingers twitching as if longing to touch it. And then there was Captain Wentworth, a retired military man with a weathered face and a limp who hovered at the room's edge, his gaze alternating between Lord Harold and the diamond. Monsieur Poirot, Lady Evelyn's voice cut through the hum of conversation. She approached, her smile warm but her eyes pleading. I'm so glad you could come. Tell me, are you enjoying the evening? Poirot bowed slightly. It is, as always, a spectacle of elegance, madame. But I sense you have more on your mind than the success of your gala. Her smile faltered. You are perceptive as ever. The star of Seraphine. It is not merely a jewel. It is a legacy, a burden. I fear. She broke, off as Roger approached, his grin wide but his eyes shadowed. Aunt Evelyn, you mustn't monopolize our famous guest, Roger said, clapping Poirot on the shoulder with a familiarity that made the detective's mustache twitch. Monsieur Poirot, have you seen the diamond up close? It's a marvel, isn't it? Indeed, Poirot replied, his tone neutral. A marvel that commands attention, and perhaps envy. Roger's laugh was a shade too sharp. Envy? Oh, come now. Who would dare? It's locked tighter than the Bank of England. Lady Evelyn's fan snapped shut. Roger, please. Monsieur Poirot, perhaps later we might speak privately? Before Poirot could respond, a commotion erupted near the diamond's pedestal. A glass shattered and Clara, the maid, gasped, her tray tilting as she stared at the display case. The crowd parted and Poirot moved swiftly, his small frame slipping through the throng with surprising agility. The glass dome was intact, the steel frame unblemished. But the velvet cushion within was empty. The star of Seraphine was gone. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Lady Evelyn clutched her necklace, her face ashen. Roger swore under his breath, his hands clenched. Lord Harold's scowl deepened, while Madame Isabella's lips curved in a faint, unreadable smile. Captain Wentworth's hand rested on his cane, his knuckles white. Mr. Grayson stood frozen, his eyes darting to the exits. The butler, Mr. Collins, appeared at Lady Evelyn's side, his face pale but composed. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of a puzzle. The game, it has begun. The quartet faltered, the music dying as the guests pressed closer, their whispers rising to a crescendo. Inspector Japp, who had been invited as a guest but was ever the policeman, pushed through the crowd, his round face flushed with indignation. Everybody stay where you are, Japp barked. Nobody leaves this room until we sort this out. Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but commanding. Monsieur l'Inspecteur, if I may, the theft of a diamond such as this requires not chaos but order. Permit me to observe. Japp, accustomed to Poirot's methods, grumbled but nodded. Right then, but no one's slipping out, you hear? Poirot approached the display case, his movements deliberate. The glass was flawless, the lock undisturbed. The steel frame showed no signs of tampering, and the pedestal stood on a raised platform, surrounded by a velvet rope that none could cross without notice. He knelt, his eyes scanning the floor, then rose, his expression inscrutable. Lady Evelyn, he said, turning to the hostess, who had access to the key for this case? Only myself and Mr. Collins, she replied, her voice trembling. And the key has been in my possession all evening. She produced a small silver key from her reticule, its intricate design glinting in the chandelier light. And you, Monsieur Collins? Poirot asked the butler. I swear, sir, I've not touched the case since it was locked before the gala, Collins said, his voice steady despite the sweat beading on his brow. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Then we have a puzzle most intriguing. A diamond does not vanish like a ghost, no? There is method here, and Hercule Poirot shall uncover it. The guests murmured, some with unease, others with excitement. Madame Isabella stepped forward, her voice silky. Perhaps it is the curse, Monsieur Poirot. They say the star brings ruin to those who possess it. Poirot's mustache twitched. Madame, I do not believe in curses, only in the greed and cunning of men and women. And tonight someone has been most cunning indeed. He turned to Jap. Inspector, I suggest we secure the manor. No one enters or leaves until I have had time to reflect. And you, mes amis, he addressed the crowd, his voice rising, prepare yourselves. Hercule Poirot does not rest until the truth is revealed. The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the guests like a fog. Lady Evelyn swayed and Roger caught her arm, his face a mask of concern. Or was it calculation? Lord, Harold drained his brandy, his eyes never leaving Poirot. Captain Wentworth leaned heavily on his cane, his expression unreadable. Clara, the maid, hovered at the edge of the crowd, her hands twisting in her apron. As Jap began organizing the guests into the drawing room for questioning, Poirot stepped onto the balcony overlooking the manor's gardens. The night air was cool, the stars above a pale imitation of the missing gem. He closed his eyes, his mind already sifting through the evening's details. The frayed cuff, the ruby in Madame Isabella's hair, the jeweler's twitching fingers, the maid's nervous glance. Somewhere in this tapestry of motives and opportunities lay the truth. The theft of the Star of Seraphine was no mere crime. Chapter 2. The scene of the crime. The air in Ashbourne Manor's ballroom had turned heavy, the earlier gaiety replaced by a palpable tension that clung to the walls like damp mist. The chandeliers still sparkled, but their light now seemed cold, illuminating a room that had transformed from a stage of elegance to the scene of a crime. The Star of Seraphine, that radiant gem which had captivated every eye, was gone, vanished from its impregnable glass case without a trace of forced entry. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the chaos, his small frame a still point amidst the restless murmur of the gathered guests. His sharp eyes, framed by the meticulous curve of his mustache, darted from face to face, cataloging every twitch, every glance, every bead of sweat. Inspector Jap, his round face flushed with the urgency of authority, barked orders to the manor's staff who scurried to secure the exits. "Nobody leaves," he bellowed, his voice echoing off the marble floors. "Not a soul until we've got to the bottom of this." His constables, summoned from the nearby village, fanned out to guard the doors, their boots clicking in a rhythm that underscored the gravity of the moment. The guests, a glittering assembly of London's elite, stood in clusters, their whispers a low hum of speculation and fear. Some clutched their champagne flutes, as if they were lifelines. Others stared at the empty pedestal, their faces pale with disbelief. Poirot approached the display case, his movements deliberate, almost ceremonial. The glass dome gleamed under the chandelier light, its surface unmarred by scratches or cracks. The steel frame, reinforced with intricate bolts, showed no signs of tampering. The velvet cushion within, once the diamond's throne, lay bare, its rich indigo a mocking reminder of what had been lost. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers hovering, just above the floor, searching for any trace. A speck of dust disturbed, a thread caught, a footprint overlooked. He found nothing. The thief had been meticulous, a phantom who left no shadow. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his voice barely audible. "A puzzle most elegant. The diamond, it does not walk away on its own, no. There is method here, and Hercule Poirot shall uncover it." He rose, brushing an imaginary speck from his immaculate suit, and turned to Inspector Jap, who was scribbling furiously in his notebook. "Well, Poirot," Jap said, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. "What do you make of it? Never seen a theft like this. Case locked tight, no marks, no nothing. It's like the blasted thing evaporated." Poirot's eyes twinkled with the thrill of the challenge. "Evaporated? Non, mon ami. The Star of Seraphine is a jewel of substance, not a wisp of air. It has been taken, by a hand most cunning. We must first understand the how before we pursue the who." Jap grunted, his skepticism tempered by years of working with Poirot. "Right then. Let's start with the basics. Lady Evelyn, the key, if you please. Lady Evelyn Ashbourne, her sapphire gown now seeming too bright against her ashen face, stepped forward. Her hands trembled as she opened her reticule and produced the small silver key, its filigree design catching the light. "This is the only key to the case," she said, her voice steady despite the strain in her eyes. "I kept it with me all evening. No one could have taken it without my notice." Poirot took the key, holding it delicately between thumb and forefinger as if it were a clue in itself. He examined it closely, noting its weight, its craftsmanship, the faint scratches that suggested frequent use. "And you are certain, madame, that it never left your possession?" "Certain," she replied, though her fingers clutched her fan tightly, betraying a flicker of doubt. I checked it periodically throughout the evening. It was always here." Poirot nodded, handing the key to Japp, who passed it to a constable for safekeeping. "And you, Monsieur Collins?" Poirot turned to the butler, who stood rigid at Lady Evelyn's side, his face pale but composed. "You have said you did not touch the case since it was locked before the gala. This is correct?" "Yes, sir," Collins replied, his voice low but firm. "I oversaw the locking myself as per Lady Evelyn's instructions. The case was secure, and I've been attending to my duties all evening, serving guests, managing the staff. I swear it, sir." Poirot's gaze lingered on the butler, noting the faint tremor in his hands, the sheen of sweat on his brow despite the coolness of the room. "Fear, perhaps, or something more?" "Very well," Poirot said, his tone neutral. "We shall verify. All accounts in due course." He turned his attention back to the display case, circling it slowly, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The lock was a complex mechanism, designed by a Swiss craftsman renowned for his security systems. The glass was tempered, resistant to all but the most determined assault. The pedestal stood on a raised platform surrounded by a velvet rope that kept guests at a distance. To approach it unnoticed during the gala, with its hundreds of eyes and constant motion, would have required extraordinary skill, or complicity. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he considered the guests. Roger Ashbourne, Lady Evelyn's nephew, stood near the ballroom's grand fireplace, his hands in his pockets, his posture casual but his eyes darting nervously. He was speaking to Madame Isabella Valenti, the opera singer, whose crimson gown and ruby-adorned chignon made her a beacon in the crowd. Their conversation was hushed, their heads close, and Poirot noted the way Roger's hand brushed her arm, a gesture too intimate for mere acquaintance. Lord Harold Ashbourne, Lady Evelyn's brother-in-law, stood apart, his silver hair gleaming under the lights. His scowl had deepened since the theft was discovered, and he clutched his empty brandy glass as if it were an anchor. His eyes flicked between the empty case and Poirot, a mixture of defiance and unease in his gaze. Clara, the young maid, hovered at the edge of the crowd, her tray now abandoned on a side table. Her hands twisted in her apron, and her wide eyes darted from guest to guest, as if expecting the thief to reveal themselves. Poirot noted her anxiety, wondering if it stemmed from fear of the crime or knowledge of it. Mr. Grayson, the jeweler, lingered near the case, his thin frame almost swallowed by the crowd. His fingers twitched, as if itching to touch the glass, and his eyes were fixed on the empty cushion with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Poirot recalled Grayson's reputation, a man who dealt in rare gems, often for clients who preferred discretion over legality. Captain Wentworth, the retired military man, leaned heavily on his cane, his weathered face unreadable. He stood near the ballroom's French doors, which led to the gardens, and Poirot wondered if his position was strategic, a vantage point to observe or to escape. "Monsieur Poirot," Lady Evelyn said, her voice pulling him from his reverie, "what do you propose? The guests are growing restless, and I cannot bear the thought that one of them might be responsible." Poirot turned to her, his expression softening, but his eyes sharp. "Madame, rest assured, Hercule Poirot does not permit a crime to go unsolved. We shall begin with a thorough examination of the scene and the accounts of all present. Inspector Japp will ensure no one leaves, and I shall employ my little gray cells to uncover the truth." Japp nodded, his notebook at the ready. "Right then. I'll start taking statements. Poirot, you want to handle the scene? Oui, Poirot replied. But first I must see the room as it was before the theft. Monsieur Collins, you will show me the preparations for the gala, every detail. And you, madame, he said to Lady Evelyn, you will tell me of the diamond's history. Every jewel has a story, and this one, I suspect, has secrets. Lady Evelyn nodded, her composure fraying. Of course. Anything you need. Collins led Poirot to the back of the ballroom, where a small door concealed the service corridor used by the staff. The corridor was narrow, its walls lined with shelves of linens and silverware. Poirot examined the door's lock, a simple mechanism, easily picked by a skilled hand. This door, he asked. It was used tonight? Yes, sir, Collins said. The staff came and went to bring in trays and clear glasses, but it was locked during the gala, and only I have the key. Another key, Poirot mused, his fingers brushing the doorframe. This manor, it is full of keys and secrets, no? He followed Collins to the preparation room, where the diamond had been placed in its case before the gala. The room was small but orderly, with a single table where the velvet cushion had rested. Poirot examined the table, the floor, the walls, searching for any sign, a smudge, a scratch, a hair. He found nothing, but his mind was already piecing together the sequence of events. The diamond had been locked in its case here, then carried to the ballroom under guard. The case had not been opened since, yet the diamond was gone. Returning to the ballroom, Poirot approached the French doors leading to the gardens. They were locked, but the key hung on a hook nearby, accessible to any staff member. He stepped. Outside, the cool night air a contrast to the stuffy ballroom. The gardens stretched into the darkness, their paths winding through manicured hedges and rosebeds. Poirot's eyes scanned the ground, noting the soft earth that might hold footprints. He found none, but the possibility of an outdoor accomplice lingered in his mind. Back inside, Jap was questioning Roger, whose answers were quick and polished but laced with a nervous edge. I was mingling all evening, Roger said, his smile tight. Never near the case, ask anyone. Madame Isabella can vouch for me. Madame Isabella, standing nearby, nodded. Haps so. Chapter 3. The suspects assemble. The drawing room of Ashbourne Manor was a study in opulence, its walls adorned with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, whose eyes seemed to follow the restless guests. Heavy velvet drapes framed tall windows that overlooked the darkened gardens, their deep crimson folds absorbing the dim light of the candelabras. The air was thick with the scent of polished wood and the faint musk of cigar smoke, a reminder of the evening's earlier revelry. Now, however, the room was a stage for a different kind of drama, one orchestrated not by music or laughter, but by suspicion and fear. Hercule Poirot stood at its center, his small frame commanding attention as he prepared to unravel the mystery of the stolen star of Seraphine. The guests, corralled by Inspector Japp's constables, sat or stood in uneasy clusters, their finery now seeming out of place in the wake of the theft. The diamond's absence hung over them like a specter, and every glance, every whispered word, was laden with accusation. Japp, his notebook open and his pencil worn to a stub, paced near the fireplace, his round face set in a scowl of determination. Right then, he announced, his voice cutting through the murmurs. We're going to get everyone's story, one by one. No one leaves until we've got answers. Poirot raised a hand, his gesture as precise as his mustache. If I may, mon ami, he said, his voice calm but resonant. The truth, it is not found in haste, but in order. Permit me to address our guests, to set the stage, as it were, for their accounts. Each of you, he turned to the assembled company, his eyes sweeping over them, is a piece in this puzzle, and Hercule Poirot, he does not rest until every piece is in its proper place. The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the crowd. Lady Evelyn Ashbourne sat in a high-backed chair near the fire, her sapphire gown pooling around her like a tide. Her hands clutched her fan. its ivory spokes trembling slightly as she met Poirot's gaze. Beside her stood Roger Ashbourne, her nephew. His charming smile replaced by a taut expression that betrayed his unease. His hands were thrust into his pockets, and Poirot noted the slight fray at his cuff, a detail that spoke of carelessness or constraint. Lord Harold Ashbourne, Lady Evelyn's brother-in-law, stood by a bookcase, his silver hair catching the firelight. His rigid posture and the brandy glass in his hand suggested a man clinging to control, but his eyes, dark and unyielding, darted toward Roger with a flicker of disdain. Madame Isabella Valenti, the opera singer, reclined on a chaise longue, her crimson gown a vivid contrast to the room's muted tones. Her ruby-adorned chignon gleamed, and her lips curved in a faint enigmatic smile as she watched Poirot with the air of a performer awaiting her cue. Clara, the young maid, stood near the door, her hands twisting in her apron. Her wide eyes flitted from guest to guest as if expecting the thief to confess at any moment. Mr. Grayson, the jeweler, hovered near a window, his thin frame almost lost in the shadows. His fingers twitched, as if still yearning to touch the missing diamond, and his pale face was drawn with a mixture of fear and fascination. Captain Wentworth, the retired military man, leaned on his cane near the French doors, his weathered face impassive but his knuckles white against the polished wood. The butler, Mr. Collins, stood at attention near Lady Evelyn, his face pale but composed, though Poirot noted the faint tremor in his hands. Other staff members, footmen, maids, and a stern-faced housekeeper named Mrs. Harrow, lingered at the room's edges, their presence a reminder that the theft could involve anyone within the manor's walls. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, his posture impeccable. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "The Star of Seraphine has been taken from a locked case in a room filled with eyes without a trace of violence. This is no ordinary theft, no. It is a performance, a masterpiece of cunning. And yet every performance leaves clues, gestures, glances, words unspoken. I ask you now to share your accounts of the evening, to reveal what you saw, what you heard, what you felt. The truth, it hides in the details." He turned to Lady Evelyn first, his eyes softening but his tone firm. "Madame, you were the guardian of the diamond. Tell us, if you please, of your movements this evening." Lady Evelyn straightened, her fan snapping open with a faint click. "I was hosting, of course," she said, her voice steady but strained. "I greeted guests, ensured the staff were performing their duties, and kept the key to the case in my reticule at all times. I confess I was distracted at times with so many people to attend to, but I never left the ballroom for more than a moment." "And the key?" Poirot pressed. "You checked it, you said. When was the last time?" She hesitated, her fingers tightening on the fan. "Just before the toast, at around 9:30. I felt it in my reticule, as always. I swear it was there." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, madame. And you, Monsieur Roger?" He turned to the nephew, whose smile flickered like a candle in a draught. Roger cleared his throat, his hands emerging from his pockets to gesture airily. "I was mingling, enjoying the evening. I danced with several ladies, Madame Isabella among them, and spoke with friends about the diamond's beauty. I was nowhere near the case when it happened. I only noticed the commotion when Clara dropped her tray." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, monsieur, you were most enthusiastic about displaying the diamond, were you not? It was your suggestion, I understand, to bring it from its vault." Roger's smile tightened. "I thought it would be a grand gesture, a way to honor Aunt Evelyn's legacy. The Star of Seraphine is a family treasure, after all." "A treasure, now lost," Poirot said softly, his gaze piercing. "And you, Madame Valenti, you danced with Monsieur Roger. What did you observe?" Madame Isabella rose from the chaise, her movements fluid, almost theatrical. "I observed a splendid gala, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice rich with the cadence of her Italian heritage. "I danced, I laughed, I admired the diamond from afar, but I saw nothing suspicious. As for Roger, he was with me much of the evening, as he said. We spoke of music, of art, of dreams." Her smile was a challenge, and Poirot met it with, a slight incline of his head. Dreams, madame, or perhaps debts? The diamond, it is said, could settle many accounts. Her eyes flashed, but her composure held. I have no debts that require such a price, monsieur. I am an artist, not a thief. Poirot turned to Lord Harold, who had drained his brandy and now gripped the empty glass. Lord Harold, you watched the diamond closely, oui? A man of your experience, you notice things others do not. Harold's scowl deepened. I noticed a room full of fools fawning over a bauble, he said brusquely. I was in the ballroom all evening, keeping an eye on things. Evelyn's too soft-hearted letting just anyone in here. I saw nothing out of the ordinary until the girl screamed about the theft. Poirot's mustache twitched. And yet, monsieur, your eyes, they lingered on the case. Was it the diamond's beauty or something else that held your attention? Harold's jaw tightened. It's a valuable asset, Poirot. I was protecting it or trying to. Clearly I failed. Poirot moved to Clara, who flinched under his gaze. Mademoiselle, you heard a clink, you said, before the glass broke and you noticed the diamond's absence. Tell me more. Clara's hands twisted in her apron, her voice barely above a whisper. I was near the pedestal, sir, offering canapes. I heard a clink, like metal on metal, and then a sort of hush, like someone holding their breath. I looked up and the glass broke. Not the case, I mean, but a glass on my tray when I bumped into Mr. Grayson. That's when I saw the cushion was empty. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A clink, a hush, a broken glass. Most interesting. And you, Monsieur Grayson? He turned to the jeweler, whose pale face seemed to pale further. Grayson swallowed, his fingers twitching. I was admiring the diamond, as I told the inspector. It's a masterpiece, flawless, unique. I was standing near the case, yes, but I didn't touch it. I was distracted when Clara bumped into me, that's all. Distracted, Poirot repeated, his voice soft but sharp. By what, monsieur? The diamond or something, someone else? Grayson's eyes darted to Roger, then away. Just the crowd, Monsieur Poirot. It was a busy evening. Poirot turned to Captain Wentworth, whose weathered face remained impassive. Captain, you stood by the French doors, a position of strategy, no? What did you see? Wentworth leaned on his cane, his voice gruff. I saw a lot of people making fools of themselves. I was watching the room, not the case specifically, but I'll tell you this. Whoever took that diamond knew what they were doing. They'd have needed time, planning, and a clear head. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging the captain's words. A clear head indeed. And you, Monsieur Collins? He turned to the butler, whose composure was beginning to crack. I was supervising the staff, sir, Collins said, his voice steady but his hands trembling. I was in and out of the ballroom, ensuring everything ran smoothly. I didn't see anyone near the case, and I didn't touch it after locking it. Poirot's eyes lingered on the butler, noting the sweat on his brow, the slight quiver in his voice. Very well, he said. We shall verify all accounts. But let us be clear. Someone in this room, or perhaps more than one, knows more than they say. The star of Seraphine is a jewel of great value, but it is the truth that Hercule Poirot values above all. The guests shifted uneasily, their eyes darting to one another. Roger whispered, Chapter 4. The little gray cells at work, the drawing room of Ashbourne Manor with its crimson drapes and ancestral portraits, had grown stifling despite the cool night air seeping through the slightly ajar windows. The candelabras flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the polished wood floors, as if mirroring the restless thoughts of the guests now dispersed to other rooms for Inspector Japp's interrogations. Hercule Poirot stood alone near the fireplace, its embers glowing faintly, his small frame silhouetted against the dying light. His hands were clasped behind his back, his head tilted slightly, and his eyes, those sharp, piercing eyes, stared into the middle distance as though seeing not the room but the intricate puzzle of the stolen star of Seraphine. The theft was a masterpiece of precision, a crime that defied the laws of logic and opportunity. A diamond, locked in a glass case, reinforced with steel, had vanished under the gaze of 100 guests with no trace of tampering, no hint of violence. The key, held by Lady Evelyn Ashbourne, had never left her reticule, or so she claimed. The butler, Mr. Collins, swore the case was secure. Clara, the maid, had heard a mysterious clink, a sound like metal on metal, moments before the theft, was discovered. And the suspects, Roger, Madame Isabella, Lord Harold, Mr. Grayson, Captain Wentworth, and others, each carried their own secrets, their own motives, their own shadows. Poirot closed his eyes, letting the details of the evening swirl in his mind like leaves in a gentle wind. His little gray cells, as he so fondly called them, were at work, sifting through the chaos of human behavior to find the thread of truth. He pictured the ballroom as it had been hours ago, alive with music and laughter, the star of Seraphine, gleaming like a captive star. He saw Roger's frayed cuff, a sign of financial strain, Madame Isabella's ruby-adorned chignon, a flourish of calculated elegance, Lord Harold's scowl, masking deeper resentments, Grayson's twitching fingers betraying a jeweler's obsession, Wentworth's steady grip on his cane, a soldier's discipline hiding something more. And Clara, poor, nervous Clara, whose wide eyes and trembling hands suggested either fear or knowledge. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, his voice a soft hum in the quiet room. The diamond, it does not vanish like a phantom. It is taken, by a hand most clever, in a moment, most opportune. But where is that moment, and who is that hand? He paced slowly, his polished shoes clicking on the floor, each step a metronome for his thoughts. The case itself was a marvel of engineering. A Swiss-designed lock, a tempered glass dome, a steel frame bolted to the pedestal. To open it without, the key would require tools, time, and expertise, none of which could go unnoticed in a crowded ballroom. Yet the key had remained with Lady Evelyn, and the lock showed no signs of tampering. Poirot paused, his fingers brushing his mustache, a gesture as familiar as breathing. The lock, it is not forced. The glass, it is not broken. The diamond, it is gone. This is not a theft of brute force, no? It is a theft of the mind. He turned to the fireplace, staring into the embers as if they might reveal the thief's face. The Star of Seraphine was no ordinary gem. Its history, hinted at by Lady Evelyn, was one of colonial conquest and whispered curses. A diamond of such value, priceless, unique, with a cut so precise it seemed to hold light itself, would tempt even the most virtuous. But who among the guests had the skill, the nerve, the opportunity? Poirot's mind returned to Clara's testimony, the clink, like metal on metal just before the commotion of her dropped tray. A clue, perhaps, or a distraction? The sound suggested precision, a tool or mechanism, but the ballroom's bustle would have masked it from most ears. Poirot moved to the window, pushing it open to let in the night air. The gardens beyond were a maze of shadows, their paths winding through hedges and rose beds. He wondered if the thief had slipped outside, perhaps to pass the diamond to an accomplice, but the French doors had been locked, their key hanging on a hook accessible only to the staff. He made a mental note to examine the gardens later for footprints or other traces, though he suspected the thief's plan was too refined for such obvious errors. Returning to the center of the room, Poirot sat in a high-backed chair, its velvet upholstery soft against his tailored suit. He closed his eyes again, reconstructing the evening moment by moment. The gala had begun at 8, with the diamond already in its case, locked by Mr. Collins, under Lady Evelyn's supervision. Guests had arrived in a steady stream, their chatter and laughter filling the ballroom. Roger had been everywhere, his charm a beacon, though his eyes betrayed a restless energy. Madame Isabella had glided through the crowd, her crimson gown drawing every gaze, her words laced with double meanings. Lord Harold had stood apart, his brandy glass a constant companion, his scowl a warning to any who approached. Grayson had lingered near the case, his jeweler's eye drinking in the diamond's facets. Wentworth had positioned himself by the French doors, his cane a silent sentinel. And Clara, darting between guests with her tray, had been a shadow, unnoticed yet omnipresent. Poirot's mind lingered on Clara. Her nervousness was understandable. A young maid, thrust into a crisis. But her mention of the clink was specific, precise. She had been near the case, serving canapes to Grayson when she heard it. Had she seen something she didn't realize was significant? Or was she perhaps more involved than she seemed? Poirot dismissed the thought for now, but filed it away, a seed to be nurtured later. He rose, pacing again, his thoughts turning to the suspect's motives. Roger, with his frayed cuffs and eager promotion of the diamonds display, might be in financial trouble. Gambling debts, perhaps, or a reckless investment, either could drive a man to theft. Madame Isabella, with her enigmatic smile and rumored connections to less savory circles, might see the diamond as a ticket to freedom or power. Lord Harold, whose disdain for the gala and its hostess was palpable, might resent Lady Evelyn's control of the family fortune, the diamond a symbol of his diminished status. Grayson, a jeweler with access to markets both legal and illicit, could sell the gem for a fortune. Wentworth, with his military precision and guarded demeanor, might have planned the theft as a final campaign. And the staff, Collins, Clara, Mrs. Harrow, knew the manor's secrets, its hidden corners, its routines. Poirot stopped, his eyes narrowing. The staff, he murmured. They move unseen like ghosts in their own domain. The butler, the maid, the housekeeper, each has access, each has opportunity. But do they have motive? He recalled Collins's trembling hands, Clara's wide-eyed fear, Mrs. Harrow's stern silence during Jap's initial questions. The housekeeper in particular intrigued him. She had said little, her face a mask of disapproval, but her eyes had followed Roger with the intensity that suggested more than professional interest. Was it loyalty to Lady Evelyn or something deeper? Resentment, perhaps, or a hidden agenda? Poirot moved to the bookcase, running his fingers along the spines of leather-bound volumes. The manor's library was vast, a repository of knowledge and secrets. He wondered if the thief had used it as a hiding place, a temporary refuge for the diamond before spiriting it away. He pulled a book at random, a treatise on gemology, and flipped through its pages, half expecting a clue to fall out. Nothing did, but the act steadied his thoughts, grounding him in the methodical process he trusted. He returned to the chair, his mind now focused on the diamond itself. The Star of Seraphine was not just a gem, but a legend, its origins shrouded in tales of colonial plunder and a curse that brought ruin to its owners. Lady Evelyn had mentioned its history briefly, but Poirot needed more. Was the curse mere superstition, or had it inspired someone to act? A thief might believe the diamond's value outweighed its risks, or they might see its theft as a way to break its supposed hold over the Ashbourne family. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Clara entered, her apron now stained with a splash of wine, her face pale. "Monsieur Poirot, sir," she said, her voice trembling. "Inspector Japp sent me to fetch you. He's questioning Mr. Roger now, and he thought you'd want to be there." Poirot studied her, noting the way her hands twisted in her apron, the slight quiver in her lip. "Merci, mademoiselle. But before we go, tell me, when you heard the clink, where exactly was Mr. Grayson standing?" Clara hesitated, her eyes darting to the floor. "He was right by the case, sir. I was offering him a canapé, and he was looking at the diamond, real close-like. That's when I heard the sound." "And did you see anyone else near the case at that moment?" Poirot asked, his voice gentle but probing. She shook her head. "No, sir. It was crowded, but no one was that close, just Mr. Grayson and me." Poirot nodded, his mind seizing the detail. "Very well. Lead me to the inspector." Clara led him through the manor's corridors, their walls lined with tapestries and gilded mirrors that reflected the flickering light of sconces. The interrogation room, a smaller parlor with a single table and several chairs, was already occupied by Japp, Roger, and a constable. Roger sat with his legs crossed, his smile strained but intact, while Japp loomed over him, his notebook open. "Poirot," Japp exclaimed, his voice a mix of relief and frustration. "This one's sticking to his story, mingling, dancing, nowhere near the case. But I don't buy it. He's too smooth, too quick with his answers." "Truth, Inspector. I had no reason to steal the diamond. It's ow. Chapter 5. A Hidden Clue. The air in Ashbourne Manor had grown thick with suspicion, the once vibrant halls now cloaked in a hush that seemed to pulse with unspoken secrets. The candelabras in the drawing room flickered, their light casting eerie shadows across the portraits of stern Ashbourne ancestors, whose painted eyes seemed to judge the living. Hercule Poirot, his small frame impeccable in his tailored suit, moved with quiet purpose through the manor's library, a vast chamber adjacent to the drawing room where the suspects had been questioned. The library was a sanctuary of knowledge, its shelves towering to the ceiling, filled with leather-bound tomes and the faint scent of aged paper. It was here, Poirot sensed, that a clue to the theft of the Star of Seraphine might lie, hidden not in the glare of the ballroom but in the quiet corners where secrets lingered. The theft of the diamond, a gem of unparalleled beauty, locked in a Swiss-crafted case of glass and steel, had shaken the manor's occupants. The gala, meant to showcase Lady Evelyn Ashbourne's wealth and prestige, had become a stage for a crime so audacious it defied logic. No forced entry, no tampered lock, no trace of the thief's hand, only the empty velvet cushion where the Star of Seraphine had rested. Poirot's little gray cells were alight with the challenge, sifting through the evening's details: Clara's clink of metal on metal, Roger's frayed cuff, Madame Isabella's enigmatic smile, Lord Harold's scowl, Mr. Grayson's twitching fingers, Captain Wentworth's guarded stance. Each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained elusive. Poirot paused before a shelf of historical texts, his gloved fingers brushing the spines as he considered the case. The library was a labyrinth of knowledge, its high ceilings and dark wood panels creating an atmosphere of solemnity. A long oak table dominated the center, scattered with books and papers left from some earlier study. A single candelabrum burned on the table, its flames casting a soft glow that barely reached the room's shadowed corners. Poirot's eyes scanned the space, searching for anything out of place. A book askew, a paper misplaced, a mark on the polished floor. He moved to the table, his step silent on the thick Persian rug. A stack of books caught his attention: treatises on gemology, histories of the Ashbourne family, and a slim volume on colonial expeditions. He picked up the gemology text, its leather cover worn but intact, and flipped through its pages. The book detailed the cutting and valuation of precious stones, with a chapter devoted to famous diamonds. Poirot's eyes lingered on a passage about the Star of Seraphine, describing its unique rose-cut facets and its rumored curse. "A gem that brings ruin," the text read, "to those who claim it without right." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Superstition," he murmured, "or a motive cloaked in myth?" He set the book down and turned to the shelf behind the table, where a row of novels stood in neat order. His fingers paused on a copy of The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins, a tale of a stolen gem that resonated with the night's events. As he pulled the book from the shelf, a small piece of paper slipped from its pages and fluttered to the floor. Poirot bent to retrieve it, his movements precise, and held it to the candlelight. It was a torn fragment of a letter, its edges jagged, the ink slightly smudged but legible. The words were few but telling. "Meet me in the garden at midnight. The exchange must be swift." G. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Mon Dieu," he whispered. "A clue, at last." The initial G pointed to Mr. Grayson, the jeweler, whose nervous demeanor and proximity to the display case had already drawn Poirot's suspicion. But the letter suggested a conspiracy, a planned rendezvous, a transaction. Was Grayson the thief, or merely a pawn in a larger scheme? And who was his correspondent? Poirot tucked the fragment into his waistcoat pocket, his mind racing. The library, he realized, was not just a repository of books but a potential hiding place. The thief, knowing the manor was sealed, might have concealed the diamond here, intending to retrieve it later. He began a systematic search, moving from shelf to shelf, his gloved hands probing for loose panels, hidden compartments, or anything amiss. He checked behind books, under cushions, inside vases, his movements methodical but swift. The library was vast, but Poirot's patience was infinite when a puzzle was at stake. As he searched, his thoughts returned to the suspects. Roger Ashbourne, with his charming exterior and financial strain, had pushed for the diamond's display, a move that now seemed less altruistic than calculated. Madame Isabella Valenti, the opera singer, had been too close to Roger, her words laced with double meanings. Lord Harold Ashbourne, Lady Evelyn's brother-in-law, harbored resentment, his scowl a mask for deeper motives. Mr. Grayson, the jeweler, had the expertise to handle a gem like the star, and the letters G pointed directly to him. Captain Wentworth, with his military precision, might have orchestrated a theft with surgical accuracy, and the staff, Clara, Mr. Collins, Mrs. Harrow, knew the manor's secrets, its passages, its routines. Poirot paused at a window overlooking the gardens, the same gardens where the letter had instructed a midnight meeting. The night was dark, the hedges and rose beds mere silhouettes under a sliver of moon. He wondered if the thief had used the gardens as an escape route or a meeting point, but the French doors in the ballroom had been locked, their key guarded by the staff. He made a mental note to inspect the grounds later, though he doubted the thief would be so careless as to leave footprints in the soft earth. Returning to his search, Poirot examined a carved wooden panel near the fireplace, its intricate design depicting a hunt. He pressed gently, testing for hidden springs, but it held firm. He moved to a globe in the corner, spinning it slowly, checking for hollow compartments. Nothing. The library was a treasure trove of knowledge, but it guarded its secrets well. As he worked, the door creaked open, and Clara entered, her apron, now crumpled, her face pale in the candlelight. "Monsieur Poirot, sir," she said, her voice trembling. "Inspector Japp sent me to see if you needed anything. He's still questioning Mr. Roger and he's getting cross." Poirot turned, his eyes softening but sharp. "Merci, Mademoiselle Clara. Your presence is most timely. Tell me, this library, do you come here often?" Clara hesitated, her hands twisting in her apron. "Not often, sir. It's mostly for the family or guests. I dust the shelves sometimes, but that's all." "And tonight?" Poirot asked, his voice gentle but probing. "Did you enter the library during the gala?" She shook her head, her eyes wide. "No, sir. I was in the ballroom serving. I didn't come here until after the diamond was gone." Poirot nodded, noting the quiver in her voice. "And yet, mademoiselle, you heard a clink, a sound like metal on metal near the display case. Could it have come from elsewhere, perhaps? A door, a tool, a hidden mechanism?" Clara's brow furrowed, her hands stilling. I don't know, sir. It was so quick and the room was so noisy. But it was close, I'm sure of it, right by the case." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Most interesting. And you saw no one else near the case, only Mr. Grayson?" "Yes, sir," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was right there looking at the diamond. I didn't see anyone else close enough." Poirot patted her arm gently. "You have been most helpful, mademoiselle. Return to the inspector and tell him I shall join him soon." As Clara left, Poirot resumed his search, his mind fixed on the letter. The garden at midnight, the exchange, the initial G. It suggested a plan, a conspiracy. But the diamond's absence from the case implied either a flawless execution or an unexpected complication. Had Grayson arranged to steal the diamond and pass it to an accomplice only to be betrayed? Or was the letter a red herring planted to mislead? He moved to a writing desk in the corner, its surface cluttered with inkwells, pens, and a stack of stationery bearing the Ashbourne crest. He sifted through the papers, finding nothing but invitations and household accounts. But as he lifted a blotting pad, he noticed a faint impression in the paper beneath, a trace of handwriting, as if someone had pressed hard while writing. He held the paper to the candlelight, tilting it to catch the indentations. The words were faint but clear. Garden, midnight. G. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A second clue, he murmured. The letter was written here, in haste, perhaps in secret. He examined the desk further, finding no other traces, but the IR discovery confirmed his suspicion. The library was a nexus of the crime, a place where plans were made or betrayed. He stepped back, his mind racing. The letter and its impression suggested a premeditated theft, but the diamond's disappearance without a trace of forced entry pointed to an inside job. Someone with access to the case, the key, or the manor's secrets. Lady Evelyn swore the key never left her reticule, but could she have been distracted, deceived? Collins, the butler, had locked the case, but his trembling hands hinted at fear or guilt. Clara's clink suggested a tool or mechanism, but her nervousness could mask complicity. And Grayson, his expertise, his proximity, his twitching fingers, seemed too obvious a suspect, yet the letter pointed to him. Poirot moved to the door, pausing to glance back at the library. It was a room of secrets, but it had yielded one clue, perhaps the first thread in unraveling the tapestry of the crime. He tucked the blotting paper into his pocket alongside the torn letter, his resolve hardening. The Star of Seraphine was out there, hidden B.A. Chapter 6. The Garden Rendezvous. The night had deepened around Ashbourne Manor, its grandeur now cloaked in an eerie stillness that seemed to hold its breath. The ballroom, once alive with music and laughter, lay silent, its chandeliers casting a dim glow over the empty pedestal where the Star of Seraphine had sparkled only hours before. Hercule Poirot, his meticulous suit a stark contrast to the disarray of the evening's events, stood at the edge of the ballroom, his sharp eyes fixed on the French doors that led to the gardens. The torn letter he had found in the library, with its cryptic instruction to meet in the garden at midnight, burned in his waistcoat pocket like a beacon. The exchange, it had said, signed with a single G. The clue pointed to Mr. Grayson, the jeweler, but Poirot knew better than to trust so obvious a trail. The truth, he sensed, lay in the shadows beyond the manor's walls. The clock in the hall struck 11, its chimes resonating through the quiet corridors. Poirot's little gray cells were alight, piecing together the fragments of the puzzle, the locked case untouched by force. Clara's clink of metal on metal, Roger's frayed cuff and nervous charm, Madame Isabella's enigmatic smile, Lord Harold's brooding resentment, Grayson's twitching fingers, Captain Wentworth's strategic silence. The letter suggested a conspiracy, a planned rendezvous, but the diamond's absence from its case implied either a flawless execution or a betrayal within the plan. Poirot resolved to uncover the truth, and the garden, with its promise of a midnight meeting, was the place to begin. He slipped through the French doors, careful not to disturb, the key that hung on its hook accessible to the staff. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of roses and damp earth. The garden stretched before him, a labyrinth of manicured hedges, gravel paths, and flower beds that glowed faintly under a sliver of moon. The paths wound through arbors draped with ivy, past marble statues whose eyes seemed to watch his progress. Poirot moved silently, his polished shoes barely crunching on the gravel, his senses alert for any sound. A footstep, a whisper, a clink like the one Clara had described. He paused at a junction where the path split, one branch leading to a rose garden, another to a secluded gazebo half hidden by willows. The letter had not specified a location, only the garden at midnight. Poirot glanced at his pocket watch. 11:15. He had time to prepare, to observe, to set the stage for the rendezvous. He chose the gazebo, its shadowed interior, offering a vantage point to watch without being seen. He slipped inside, positioning himself behind a lattice screen draped with ivy, his small frame blending into the darkness. The gazebo was a delicate structure, its wooden frame painted white, its roof adorned with climbing roses. A stone bench sat at its center, flanked by potted ferns that rustled faintly in the breeze. Poirot's eyes adjusted to the dim light, scanning the paths that converged on the gazebo. If the letter was genuine, someone would come. Grayson, perhaps, or his unknown accomplice. If it was a ruse planted to mislead, then Poirot's presence would reveal nothing but the night's silence. Either way, he was ready. As he waited, his mind retraced the evening's events. The star of Seraphine had vanished from a locked case in a crowded ballroom, with no sign of tampering. Lady Evelyn swore the key never left her reticule, and Mr. Collins, the butler, confirmed the case was secure. Clara's clink suggested a tool or mechanism, but her nervous demeanor raised questions. Was she a witness or something more? Roger, with his financial strain, had pushed for the diamonds' display, his charm a mask for desperation. Madame Isabella, with her rumored ties to shadowy circles, had been too close to Roger, their whispered conversations hinting at intimacy or conspiracy. Lord Harold's resentment of Lady Evelyn's control over the estate was palpable, his scowl a shield for deeper motives. Grayson, with his jeweler's expertise, was the obvious suspect, yet the letter's clarity made Poirot wary. And Wentworth, with his military precision, watched the room with a soldier's eye, his silence as telling as any confession. The clock in the manor struck 11:30, the distant chimes muffled by the garden's hush. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound, a rustle not of leaves but of fabric. He tensed, his eyes narrowing as he peered through the lattice. A figure emerged from the rose garden, moving with purpose along the gravel path. The moonlight caught the crimson of a gown, the gleam of a ruby in dark hair. Madame Isabella Valenti, her elegance undiminished by the hour, approached the gazebo, her steps measured but cautious. She paused at the entrance, her eyes scanning the shadows. "Are you there?" she whispered, her voice low but carrying the musical cadence of her stage persona. "We haven't much time." Poirot remained still, his breath shallow, his presence undetected. Madame Isabella waited, her hands clasped tightly, her ruby glinting as she turned her head. Another figure appeared, this one heavier, limping slightly. Captain Wentworth, his cane tapping softly on the gravel. He stopped short of the gazebo, his weathered face half lit by the moon. "Is it done?" he asked, his voice gruff but hushed. "You said it would be quick." Madame Isabella's lips tightened. "It was meant to be," she replied, her tone sharp. "But something went wrong. The case was empty before I could act." Wentworth's grip tightened on his cane. "Empty? Then who—" "Quiet," she hissed, glancing toward the manor. "Someone's betrayed us. The plan was perfect, but now—" Poirot's heart quickened, his mind seizing every word. A plan, a betrayal, an empty case. Madame Isabella and Wentworth were conspirators, but not the thieves. The diamond had been taken before their scheme could unfold, suggesting a second player, a rival thief. But who? Grayson with his letter? Roger with his debts? Or someone else entirely? The conversation was cut short by a sudden noise, a snap of a twig sharp in the night's silence. Madame Isabella froze, her eyes wide, while Wentworth turned, his cane raised like a weapon. "Who's there?" he growled, his voice low but commanding. Poirot held his breath, his body pressed against the lattice. The sound had come from the rose garden, too deliberate to be an animal. Another figure was out there watching, waiting. Madame Isabella backed into the gazebo, her gown brushing the ferns, her breath quickening. Wentworth moved toward the sound, his limp slowing his steps but not his resolve. "Show yourself," he called, his voice a challenge. Silence followed, heavy and taut. Then, from the shadows, a soft laugh, a man's laugh, familiar yet chilling. Poirot's mind raced, matching the sound to Roger Ashbourne's too charming voice. But before he could act, the laughter faded and footsteps crunched on the gravel, retreating toward the manor. Madame Isabella swore under her breath, a word unbecoming of her elegance. "He's playing with us," she said, her voice trembling, with anger or fear. "We need to find it before he does." Wentworth nodded, his face grim. "Back to the manor. We'll deal with this inside." They left the gazebo, their figures vanishing into the night. Poirot waited, counting to 10, then emerged from his hiding place. His heart pounded, not with fear, but with the thrill of discovery. The garden rendezvous had revealed a conspiracy, Madame Isabella and Wentworth planning to steal the diamond only to find it already gone. Roger's laugh suggested he knew more than he admitted, perhaps even orchestrating the theft to outwit his partners. But the letter signed G pointed to Grayson. The threads were tangling, but Poirot was determined to unravel them. He examined the gazebo, searching for any trace. A dropped item, a mark in the earth. He found nothing, but the conversation lingered in his mind. The plan was perfect, Madame Isabella had said. What plan? And who had betrayed it? Poirot returned to the manor, slipping through the French doors with the stealth of a cat. The ballroom was empty now, the guests confined to their rooms or under Japp's scrutiny. He made his way to the interrogation parlor, where Japp was questioning Mr. Collins, the butler, whose trembling hands were more pronounced than ever. "Poirot!" Japp exclaimed, his face flushed with frustration. "This one's sticking to his story, locked the case, never touched it since. But I don't trust him. Where have you been?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "In the garden, mon ami, where secrets bloom like roses. I have heard things most illuminating. But for now, let us focus on Monsieur Collins. Tell me, monsieur, did you see anyone enter the garden tonight?" Collins paled, his hands clenching. "No, sir. I was in the ballroom, then the drawing room, with the guests. I didn't go outside." Poirot nodded, his gaze piercing. "And yet the French doors, their key is accessible to the staff, oui? Could someone have taken it, perhaps, without your notice?" Collins hesitated, his eyes darting to Japp. "It's possible, sir, but I kept a close eye. The key was there all evening." Poirot's mustache twitched. "A close eye, but not close enough, perhaps. Merci, monsieur." As Collins was dismissed, Japp turned to Poirot, his voice low. "What did you hear out there? You've got that look, Poirot, like you've sniffed out something juicy." Poirot smiled faintly. "A conversation, mon ami, between two who thought themselves alone. Madame Isabella and Captain Wentworth, they spoke of a plan gone wrong, a diamond already taken. They are conspirators, but not the thieves. Someone else has the star of Seraphine, and I suspect Monsieur Roger knows more than he admits." Japp's eyes widened. "Roger? That slippery devil. I knew Estienne we wait. The thief I—" Chapter 7. A tangled web of alibis. The grand halls of Ashbourne Manor, with their gilded mirrors and tapestries, seemed to close in as the night wore on, the weight of suspicion pressing against the walls. The ballroom, once a stage for elegance and revelry, now lay silent, its chandeliers casting a cold, flickering light over the empty pedestal where the star of Seraphine had gleamed. The theft of the diamond, a gem of unparalleled brilliance vanished from a locked case without a trace of force, had transformed the manor into a gilded cage, its occupants trapped by their own secrets. Hercule Poirot, his small frame impeccable, in his tailored suit, moved through the corridors with the quiet purpose of a man who saw not just the surfaces but the shadows beneath. His little gray cells were ablaze, weaving together the threads of the case. Clara's clink of metal, the torn letter signed G, the garden rendezvous between Madame Isabella and Captain Wentworth, and the laughter of Roger Ashbourne. In the night. The drawing room, where the suspects had been gathered earlier, was now a hub of tension, its crimson drapes and ancestral portraits bearing witness to the unfolding drama. Inspector Japp, his round face etched with frustration, had set up a makeshift interrogation parlor in a smaller room off the main hall, its walls lined with books and a single table illuminated by a candelabrum. The guests, confined to their rooms or under the watchful eyes of Japp's constables, were being called one by one to provide their alibis, their stories scrutinized for cracks. Poirot, however, knew that the truth lay not just in words but in the silences between them, the glances, the hesitations, the tells of a guilty heart. He stood by the fireplace in the drawing room, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes half closed as he replayed the garden conversation he had overheard. Madame Isabella and Captain Wentworth, conspirators in a failed plan to steal the diamond, had spoken of betrayal, of a case already empty. Roger's laughter, sharp and mocking, suggested he knew more than he admitted. Perhaps the architect of the theft, or a rival to their scheme. The letter, with its G and its midnight rendezvous, pointed to Mr. Grayson, the jeweler, but its clarity made Poirot wary. A true mastermind would not leave such an obvious trail. The alibis, he knew, would be the key to untangling this web, for no lie could withstand the scrutiny of Hercule Poirot. Japp emerged from the interrogation parlor, his notebook flapping, his face flushed with the strain of the night. "Poirot," he called, his voice a mix of exasperation and hope. "I've got their stories, but they're a mess. Everyone's got an alibi, and none of them match up clean. You ready to poke holes in this lot?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Mon ami, a web of alibis is like a tapestry, beautiful from afar, but up close the threads unravel. Let us begin." They entered the parlor, where Lady Evelyn Ashbourne sat, her sapphire gown now slightly creased, her fan idle in her lap. Her face was pale, but her eyes held a quiet resolve as she met Poirot's gaze. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, "I have told the inspector all I know. I was in the ballroom hosting greeting guests. The key to the case never left my reticule." Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Madam, your devotion to your guests is admirable, but let us be precise. You said you checked the key at 9:30 before the toast. Where were you at the moment Clara heard the clink, just before the theft was discovered?" Lady Evelyn hesitated, her fingers tightening on her fan. "I was near the musicians, speaking with Lord Percival about the estate. I cannot recall the exact moment, but I was not near the case." Poirot's gaze was piercing. "And yet, madame, the key is the heart of this mystery. Could someone have taken it, perhaps, during a moment of distraction?" Her eyes widened, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. "I suppose it's possible, but I was so careful. I felt it in my reticule, I'm sure of it." Poirot nodded, filing her response away. "Merci, madame. For now you may return to the drawing room." As Lady Evelyn left, Japp leaned in, his voice low. "She's rattled, Poirot. Think she's hiding something?" "Perhaps," Poirot replied, his tone neutral. "But fear is not always guilt. Let us continue." Next was Roger Ashbourne, his charming smile strained, his hands thrust into his pockets to hide their restlessness. "Monsieur Poirot, Inspector," he said, nodding to each. "I've said it before, I was mingling, dancing with Madame Isabella, talking with friends. I was nowhere near the case when the diamond vanished." Poirot tilted his head, his eyes gleaming. "Monsieur Roger, you are most sociable, oui. But Clara places you near the dance floor, not far from the case, when she heard the clink. And in the garden I heard a laugh. Yours, I believe. What were you doing there at midnight?" Roger's smile faltered, his eyes darting to Japp. "The garden? I stepped out for air, that's all. The ballroom was stifling. I didn't laugh, Monsieur Poirot. You must be mistaken." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Hercule Poirot is never mistaken about a laugh, monsieur. It is as distinctive as a fingerprint. And yours, it was mocking, none. As if you knew something others did not." Roger's jaw tightened. "I know nothing about the theft. I was with Madame Isabella most of the evening. She'll confirm it." "Indeed," Poirot said softly. "We shall see." Madame Isabella Valenti entered next, her crimson gown a vivid contrast to the room's muted tones. Her ruby-adorned chignon gleamed in the candlelight, and her smile was a masterpiece of composure. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice musical, "I am at your service." I was dancing, conversing, enjoying the gala. Roger was with me, as he said, for much of the evening. Poirot's eyes locked onto hers. "Madame, your elegance is matched only by your discretion. But in the garden at midnight, you spoke with Captain Wentworth of a plan gone wrong, a diamond already taken. What was this plan, and who betrayed it?" Her smile froze, her eyes flashing with a mix of fear and defiance. "You were listening," Monsieur? How indiscreet. I assure you it was a private matter, nothing to do with the diamond. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but relentless. A private matter in a garden at midnight, speaking of betrayal? Madame, Hercule Poirot does not believe in coincidences. You will tell me, or the truth will find you. She hesitated, her fingers brushing the ruby in her hair. It was a misunderstanding. Captain Wentworth and I were discussing a business arrangement, nothing more. The diamond's theft surprised us as much as anyone. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. For now, Madame, you may go, but the truth, it has a way of singing, like one of your arias. Lord Harold Ashbourne was next, his silver hair and rigid posture a study in controlled anger. I've told the inspector, he said brusquely. I was in the ballroom keeping an eye on things. I didn't touch the case and I didn't see anyone else near it. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Monsieur, you claim to have been vigilant. Yet Clara saw you near the case, not in your study as you first said. Why the discrepancy? Harold's scowl deepened. The girl's mistaken. I was near the case earlier, admiring it, but not when the theft happened. I was by the fireplace talking to a guest. Which guest? Poirot pressed. Harold hesitated, his fingers tightening on his brandy glass. I don't recall. It was a busy evening. Poirot's mustache twitched. A busy evening, yet you recall so little. Most curious. Mr. Grayson, the jeweler, followed, his thin frame trembling as he sat. I was admiring the diamond, he said, his voice high and nervous. It's a masterpiece, Monsieur Poirot. But I didn't touch the case, I swear it. Poirot held up the torn letter, watching Grayson's eyes widen. This, monsieur, was found in the library, signed with a G. It speaks of a meeting, an exchange. What do you know of this? Grayson paled, his fingers twitching. I wrote no such letter. I was in the ballroom, not the library. Someone's trying to frame me. Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. A frame, perhaps, or a truth you hide. We shall see. Captain Wentworth entered, his cane tapping the floor, his weathered face impassive. I was by the French doors, he said, his voice gruff. Watching the room, not the case, I saw nothing suspicious. Poirot leaned forward. And yet, monsieur, in the garden, you spoke with Madame Isabella of a plan gone wrong. What was this plan? And why meet in secret? Wentworth's knuckles whitened on his cane. A private matter, Poirot. Nothing to do with the diamond. You're barking up the wrong tree. Poirot smiled faintly. A tree with many branches, perhaps. But Hercule Poirot climbs them all. The staff were questioned last. Clara, Mr. Collins, Mrs. Harrow? Clara repeated her story of the clink, her hands trembling. Collins insisted he was supervising, his voice steady but his eyes darting. Mrs. Harrow, stern and silent, claimed she was in the kitchens, her alibi supported by other staff but lacking detail. As the interrogations ended, Poirot returned to the drawing room, his mind a whirl of contradictions. The alibis were a tangled web, each thread fragile, each suspect hiding something. Roger's garden laughter, Madame Isabella's conspiracy, Lord Harold's discrepancy, Grayson's letter, Wentworth's secrecy, Clara's clink, all pointed to a truth buried deep. The star of Seraphine was out there, hidden by a cunning mind, but Poirot's little gray cells were sharper still. The web of alibis would unravel, and the truth would shine like the diamond itself. Chapter 8. The Curse of the Star. The night at Ashbourne Manor had grown heavy, the air thick with the weight of secrets and the lingering echoes of a gala turned sour. The grand drawing room, with its crimson drapes and stern ancestral portraits, seemed to close in on itself, the candelabras casting flickering shadows that danced like specters across the polished wood floors. Hercule Poirot stood by a tall window, his small frame silhouetted against the faint moonlight filtering through, the glass his hands clasped behind his back. His sharp eyes, framed by the impeccable curve of his mustache, gazed out at the darkened gardens. But his mind was elsewhere, sifting through the tangled threads of the case. The stolen star of Seraphine, vanished from a locked case. Clara's mysterious clink, the torn letter signed G. The garden rendezvous of Madame Isabella and Captain Wentworth, Roger's mocking laugh in the night. Each clue was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained elusive, hidden in the shadows of human greed and deception. Poirot's little gray cells were alight, working tirelessly to unravel the mystery. The alibis of the suspects, Lady Evelyn, Roger, Madame Isabella, Lord Harold, Mr. Grayson, Captain Wentworth, and the staff, had formed a web of contradictions, each story fragile, each motive veiled. The letter pointed to Grayson, the jeweler, but its obviousness made Poirot wary. Madame Isabella and Wentworth's conspiracy suggested a failed theft, yet the diamond was already gone, hinting at a rival schemer. Roger's laughter in the garden implied knowledge, perhaps complicity. But there was another thread. One lady. Evelyn had mentioned in passing the curse of the Star of Seraphine, a legend of ruin that clung to the diamond like a shadow. Poirot did not believe in curses, but he knew that belief could drive men and women to desperate acts. He turned from the window, his polished shoes clicking softly on the floor tip. youtube.com, watch 805 UI 6VDH0's floor as he crossed the Yao drawing room to a velvet upholstered chair near the fireplace. The embers glowed faintly, their warmth a faint comfort against the chill of the manor's secrets. Poirot sat, his posture impeccable, and closed his eyes, letting his mind wander to the diamond's history. Lady Evelyn had spoken of it briefly, but its full story might hold the key to understanding the motives behind its theft. He needed to know more, and there was one person who could provide the answers. Lady Evelyn herself, the keeper of the Ashbourne legacy. Poirot rose and made his way through the silent corridors, their walls lined with tapestries and gilded mirrors that reflected the flickering light of sconces. The manor was a labyrinth, its grandeur masking a maze of hidden motives. He found Lady Evelyn in a small parlor, seated on a chaise longue, her sapphire gown now creased, her face pale but composed. A single candelabrum illuminated the room, casting her features in soft relief, her eyes heavy with the weight of the night's events. "Madame," Poirot began, his voice gentle but firm as he bowed slightly. "Forgive my intrusion at this late hour. The Star of Seraphine, it is more than a jewel, no? You spoke of its history, its curse. I must know all if I am to uncover the truth of its disappearance." Lady Evelyn's hands tightened on her fan, its ivory spokes gleaming in the candlelight. She sighed, her eyes distant, as if peering into the past. "You wish to know of the star, Monsieur Poirot? It is a tale of beauty and tragedy, one that has haunted my family for generations." She gestured for Poirot to sit, and he took a chair opposite her, his posture attentive, his eyes fixed on her face. "The Star of Seraphine," she began, her voice low and steady, "was discovered in India during a colonial expedition in the early 19th century. My husband's ancestor, Sir Reginald Ashbourne, was a young officer in the East India Company. He was part of an expedition to a remote region where they found the diamond in a temple, hidden within a statue of a goddess. The locals called it the Star of Seraphine, after a mythical figure said to guard it. They warned that it was cursed, that it brought ruin to those who took it without divine blessing. Sir Reginald dismissed their tales as superstition and brought the diamond back to England, where it became the pride of the Ashbourne family. She paused, her fingers tracing the edge of her fan. "The diamond is extraordinary, rose-cut, with facets that capture light like no other. Its value is incalculable, not just for its size, but for its rarity. But the curse, it followed us. Sir Reginald died in a hunting accident a year after returning. His son, who inherited the diamond, lost his fortune in a failed venture and took his own life. The next generation saw illness, scandal, my own husband's death in a carriage accident. I kept the star locked in a vault, fearing its influence, but Roger convinced me to display it tonight, to restore our family's prestige." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mind cataloging every word. "This curse, madame. Do others believe in it? Your nephew? Your brother-in-law? Your guests?" Lady Evelyn's lips tightened. "Roger laughs at it, calls it an old wives' tale. Harold is more superstitious. He's always urged me to sell the diamond, to rid us of its shadow. The staff whisper about it. I've heard Clara and Mrs. Harrow speak of it in hushed tones. As for the guests, Madame Isabella mentioned it tonight almost mockingly, and Mr. Grayson, being a jeweler, knows its history well. Captain Wentworth, he's a practical man, but even he seemed uneasy when I spoke of it earlier. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but probing. And you, Madame? Do you believe the curse drove someone to steal the star? She hesitated, her eyes glistening. I don't know, Monsieur Poirot. I want to believe it's just a story, but the losses, the tragedies, they weigh on me. Perhaps someone thought to break the curse by taking it, or to profit from its legend. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The curse was a myth, but its power lay in the fear it inspired. A thief might steal the diamond to sell it, to defy its curse or to wield its mystique. The motives were as varied as the suspects. Roger, desperate to clear debts. Madame Isabella, tied to shadowy circles. Lord Harold, resentful of the family. Legacy. Grayson, obsessed with the gem's perfection. Wentworth, strategic and secretive. Clara, nervous and observant. Collins, trembling and loyal. Mrs. Harrow, stern and silent. He rose, bowing slightly. Merci, Madame. Your words have illuminated. The star of Seraphine is a jewel of desire, and desire breeds deception. I shall find it. Lady Evelyn nodded, her face weary. I trust you, Monsieur Poirot. If anyone can, it is you. Poirot returned to the drawing room, his thoughts a whirl of history and motive. The curse was a shadow, but it cast light on the suspects' hearts. Roger's dismissal of it suggested confidence or arrogance. Lord Harold's urge to sell implied fear or greed. Madame Isabella's mockery hinted at calculation, perhaps a plan to exploit the legend. Grayson's obsession with the diamonds, craftsmanship could drive him to theft, curse or no. Wentworth's unease suggested a man who planned carefully, perhaps to outwit fate. The staff, steeped in the manor's lore, might see the diamond as a curse to be rid of or a prize to claim. Poirot paced the room, his polished shoes clicking on the floor, his mind sifting through the alibis and clues. The torn letter, the garden, rendezvous, Clara's clink, all pointed to a conspiracy. But the curse added a new layer. Was it a motive, a distraction, or a myth exploited by a cunning mind? The star of Seraphine was more than a gem. It was a mirror reflecting the flaws of those around it, and Hercule Poirot with his little gray cells would polish that mirror until the truth shone clear. The night stretched on, the manor a labyrinth of secrets and shadows. The suspects were scattered, their alibis fragile, their motives tangled. But Poirot was undaunted. The curse of the star was no match for his intellect, and he would prove it before the dawn. Chapter 9. An Unexpected Ally. The night at Ashbourne Manor had settled into a tense stillness, the grandeur of its halls now cloaked in suspicion and shadow. The drawing room, with its crimson drapes and ancestral portraits, flickered under the dim light of candelabras, their flames casting wavering shadows that seemed to whisper secrets. Hercule Poirot stood near the fireplace, his small frame impeccable in his tailored suit, his hands clasped behind his back. His sharp eyes, framed by the precise curve of his mustache, were half closed, his mind a whirl of details. The stolen star of Seraphine vanished from a locked case, Clara's clink of metal, the torn letter signed G, the garden rendezvous between Madame Isabella and Captain Wentworth, Roger's mocking laugh, and the curse that haunted the diamonds. History. Each clue was a thread in a tapestry of deception, and Poirot's little gray cells were tirelessly weaving them together to uncover the truth. The manor was a gilded prison, its occupants confined by Inspector Japp's constables, their alibis a tangled web of half-truths. The letter pointed to Mr. Grayson, the jeweler, but its clarity suggested a possible ruse. Madame Isabella and Wentworth's failed conspiracy hinted at a rival thief, while Roger's laughter implied knowledge or complicity. The curse, as Lady Evelyn had described, was a myth that fueled fear and desire, a motive for theft or a distraction, crafted by a cunning mind. Poirot knew the truth lay not just in the clues, but in the hearts of those who coveted the star. And now, as the clock neared 1 in the morning, He sensed an opportunity to gain an ally in the unlikeliest of places, the tar. Doctor to the drawing room creaked open, and Clara, the young maid, slipped inside, her apron crumpled, her face pale in the candlelight. Her hands twisted nervously and her wide eyes darted toward Poirot as if seeking permission to speak. "Monsieur Poirot, sir," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to tell you something. It's important." Poirot turned, his expression softening but his eyes sharp. "Mademoiselle Clara, you are most welcome. Come, sit." He gestured to a velvet chair near the fire, its glow casting a warm light on her anxious face. "What is it that troubles you?" Clara hesitated, glancing at the door as if expecting an interruption. She sat, her hands clutching her apron, and took a shaky breath. "It's about the diamond, sir. I found something after the theft. When I was clearing the ballroom, I didn't tell Inspector Japp because I was afraid, but I trust you, Monsieur Poirot. You seem kind." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile touching his lips. "Kindness, mademoiselle, is a tool of justice. Tell me, what did you find?" Clara reached into her apron pocket, her fingers trembling as she produced a small object wrapped in a handkerchief. She unfolded it carefully, revealing a single glove. Black, leather, finely made, but stained with a faint smear of what looked like polish. "I found this, sir, near the display case under a table. It's not one of the guests' gloves. I checked. It's different, like it belongs to someone who works with their hands." Poirot took the glove, holding it delicately between gloved fingers, his eyes examining every detail. The leather was supple, but worn at the fingertips, and the smear was a glossy residue, faintly metallic in scent. "This polish," he murmured. "It is not for shoes, no? It is for metal, perhaps, or gemstones." His mind flashed to Mr. Grayson, the jeweler, whose expertise would include such tools. "Where exactly did you find it, mademoiselle?" "Under the table closest to the pedestal, sir," Clara said, her voice steadier now. "I was sweeping up after the commotion when everyone was being moved to the drawing room. I saw it in the corner, half hidden by the tablecloth. I didn't know what to do, so I kept it." Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. "You have done well, Mademoiselle Clara. This glove, it is a clue most valuable. Tell me, did you see anyone near the case besides Mr. Grayson when you heard the clink?" Clara's brow furrowed, her hands stilling. "No, sir, not really. It was so crowded, and I was busy with my tray, but I think I saw someone move quickly just out of the corner of my eye right after the clink. It was too fast to be sure, but they were heading toward the French doors." Poirot's heart quickened. The French doors leading to the garden where Madame Isabella and Wentworth had met, where Roger's laugh had echoed. "A figure moving swiftly," he repeated softly. "Most interesting. And you, mademoiselle, you are certain this glove was not there before the theft?" Clara nodded vigorously. "I'm sure, sir. I was near that table all evening, serving. I'd have noticed it." Poirot tucked the glove into his waistcoat pocket alongside the torn letter, his mind racing. The glove, with its jeweler's polish, pointed again to Grayson, but the figure moving toward the doors suggested another player, a staff member perhaps, or a guest with access to the key. Clara's honesty, her nervous courage made her an unexpected ally, a pair of eyes in a household where trust was scarce. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said, his voice gentle but firm, "you have given me a great gift. This glove, it may unlock the mystery. But you must be cautious. Tell no one of this, not even Inspector Japp, until I say. The thief is among us, and they are clever." Clara's eyes widened, but she nodded. "I trust you, sir. I'll keep quiet. But I'm scared. Monsieur Poirot, what if they know I found it?" Poirot patted her hand, his touch reassuring. "Fear not, mademoiselle. Hercule Poirot protects those who aid the truth. You will be my eyes in this matter, oui? Watch the guests, the staff. Note anything unusual, glances, whispers, movements. Report to me alone." Clara swallowed, her face resolute despite her fear. "I will, sir. I want to help. The diamond. It's Lady Evelyn's heart, and I hate seeing her so sad. Poirot smiled, his eyes warm. "You are loyal, mademoiselle. That is a rare quality. Go now and be discreet." As Clara slipped out, Poirot turned to the fireplace, his mind a whirl of new possibilities. The glove was a tangible clue, unlike the letter's cryptic words or the garden's whispered conspiracy. Its polish suggested a jeweler's hand, but its placement near the French doors hinted at a swift escape or a staged distraction. Was Grayson the thief, dropping the glove in haste, or was it planted to implicate him, just as the letter might be? The figure Clara saw moving toward the doors could be Roger, Wentworth, or even a staff member like Collins or Mrs. Harrow. Poirot paced the room, his polished shoes clicking on the floor, his thoughts weaving a tapestry of suspicion. The suspects' alibis were fragile. Lady Evelyn's key, never out of her sight yet vulnerable in a crowded room. Roger's dance with Madame Isabella, too convenient a cover. Madame Isabella's garden plot, foiled by an earlier theft. Lord, Harold's discrepancy, claiming to be by the fireplace when Clara saw him near the case. Grayson's nervous denial now shadowed by the glove. Wentworth's secrecy, his military precision a perfect mask. Collins's trembling hands hinting at fear or guilt. Mrs. Harrow's stern silence, a wall hiding unknown motives. He stopped, his eyes falling on a portrait above the fireplace, a stern-faced man in 19th century attire, likely Sir Reginald Ashbourne, the diamond's first owner. The curse, Lady Evelyn had said, began with him, a legacy of ruin that followed the star. Poirot dismissed the curse as superstition, but its power lay in the fear it inspired. Someone in this manner, guest or servant, might believe it, or use it to justify their actions. The glove, the letter, the clink, all pointed to a plan executed with precision, but every plan had a flaw, and Poirot was determined to find it. He made his way to the interrogation parlor, where Japp was questioning Mrs. Harrow, the housekeeper, her stern face unyielding. "Poirot," Japp called, his voice weary. "This one's like talking to a brick wall. Says she was in the kitchens all evening, backed up by the other staff, but she's got no details." Poirot nodded, his eyes on Mrs. Harrow. "Madame, you know this manor's secrets, oui? Its passages, its routines. Did you see anyone near the French doors, perhaps, or handling anything unusual? A tool, a glove?" Mrs. Harrow's lips tightened, her eyes cold. "I was in the kitchens, monsieur. I saw nothing but pots and pans. The staff were busy and I kept them so." Poirot's mustache twitched. "A busy household, yet a diamond vanishes. Most curious. Merci, madame." As Mrs. Harrow left, Japp leaned in, his voice low. "What's got you so chipper, Poirot? You've got that gleam in your eye." Poirot smiled faintly. "A clue, mon ami, and an ally. The truth is closer, but it hides in plain sight. We must watch, listen, and wait." The night deepened, the manor a maze of shadows and secrets. Clara's glove was a beacon, guiding Poirot toward the truth. The star of Seraphine was out there, hidden by a cunning mind, but with an unexpected ally at his side. Poirot's little gray cells were sharper than ever. The thief's web was unraveling, and the truth would soon shine bright. Chapter 10. The Jeweler's Secret. The night at Ashbourne Manor had grown dense with suspicion, the once grand halls now cloaked in a stillness that seemed to pulse with unspoken truths. The drawing room, its crimson drapes drawn tight against, the darkness flickered under the dim glow of candelabras, their flames casting restless shadows across the ancestral portraits. Hercule Poirot stood by the fireplace, his small frame impeccable in his tailored suit, his hands clasped behind his back. His sharp eyes, framed by the precise curve of his mustache, were half closed, his mind a whirlwind of clues. The stolen Star of Seraphine vanished from a locked case. Clara's clink of metal, the torn letter signed G, the garden rendezvous between Madame Isabella and Captain Wentworth. Roger's mocking laugh, the curse haunting the diamond's history. And now the black leather glove stained with jeweler's polish, found by Clara near the display case. Each clue was a thread in a tapestry of deception, and Poirot's little gray cells were weaving them together with relentless precision. The glove, tucked safely in Poirot's waistcoat pocket alongside the torn letter, was a tangible link to the crime, its polish suggesting a jeweler's hand. Mr. Grayson, perhaps, whose nervous demeanor and expertise made him a prime suspect. Yet the letter's obviousness and the garden conspiracy hinted at a more complex plot, one where Grayson might be a pawn rather than a mastermind. Madame Isabella and Wentworth's failed scheme suggested a rival thief, while Roger's laughter implied he knew more than he admitted. Clara, now an unexpected ally, had given Poirot a new perspective, her nervous honesty a beacon in the manor's shadows. The curse, though dismissed by Poirot as superstition, added a layer of motive: fear, greed, or a desire to defy fate. The alibis were fragile, the suspects' secrets deeper than they seemed, and Poirot knew the time had come to press harder, to uncover the truth hidden in their lies. He made his way through the silent corridors, their walls lined with tapestries, and gilded mirrors reflecting the flickering light of sconces. The manor was a labyrinth, its grandeur masking a maze of motives. Poirot's destination was the small parlor where Inspector Japp was conducting interrogations, his notebook worn from hours of scribbling. Japp had questioned the suspects repeatedly, but their alibis remained a tangled web, each story contradicting another. Poirot needed to confront Grayson, to test the jeweler's secret against the glove and the letter, to see if his twitching fingers hid guilt or fear. The parlor was dimly lit, a single candelabrum casting a soft glow over a table cluttered, with papers and a half-empty teapot. Japp sat with his sleeves rolled up, his round face flushed with frustration. Mr. Grayson, the jeweler, was seated across from him, his thin frame hunched, his pale hands fidgeting on the table. His eyes darted to Poirot as he entered, a flicker of panic crossing his face. "Poirot!" Japp exclaimed, his voice weary but hopeful. "This one's sticking to his story, admiring the diamond, never touched the case. But he's nervous as a cat. What have you got?" Poirot took a chair, his movements deliberate, his eyes fixed on Grayson. "Monsieur Grayson," he began, his voice calm but piercing, "you are a man of gems, oui? A jeweler of repute whose hands know the secrets of stones. The Star of Seraphine, it is a masterpiece, you said. A temptation, perhaps, for one who understands its value." Grayson's fingers twitched, his voice high and strained. "I admired it, Monsieur Poirot, as any jeweler would. It's flawless. Rose-cut, with facets that catch light like a prism. But I didn't steal it. I was near the case, yes, but I never touched it." Poirot reached into his pocket, producing the torn letter and holding it up to the candlelight. "This, monsieur, was found in the library, signed with a G. It speaks of a meeting in the garden, an exchange. Your initial, no? And this," he produced the glove, its leather gleaming faintly, "was found near the display case, stained with polish used by jewelers. Explain, if you please." Grayson's face paled, his hands trembling as he leaned back. I wrote no letter, and that glove, it's not mine. I swear, Monsieur Poirot, someone's trying to frame me. I'm a professional, not a thief." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his voice soft but relentless. "A professional, oui, but one with debts, perhaps? Or connections to those who deal in gems less legally. The Star of Seraphine could erase many troubles, could it not?" Grayson swallowed, his eyes darting to Japp, then back to Poirot. I admit, I've had financial difficulties. The market for rare gems is fickle, and I've taken risks. But I didn't steal the diamond, He hesitated, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I was approached, though, by Roger Ashbourne a week ago. He asked if I could find a buyer for a gem, a hypothetical gem, he said. I thought he was joking, but now—" Poirot's mustache twitched, his heart quickening. "Monsieur Roger approached you? And what did you say?" Grayson's fingers clenched. "I told him I could if the price was right. I deal with collectors, discreet ones, but it was just talk. I never saw the diamond outside the case, and I didn't take it." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze unrelenting. And this? Meeting in the garden, this exchange, what do you know of it? Grayson shook his head, his voice desperate. Nothing. I was in the ballroom all evening except for a moment to step outside for air. I didn't go to the garden at midnight, I swear it. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Very well, monsieur. For now you may go. But know this, Hercule. Poirot sees through lies and the truth will find you. As Grayson left, his shoulders slumped, Japp turned to Poirot, his eyes wide. Roger, eh? That slippery devil's at the heart of this, I'd wager. What's your take? Poirot clasped his hands behind his back. Monsieur Grayson is afraid, mon ami, but fear is not always guilt. His story of Roger's approach is most illuminating. It suggests a plan, perhaps a conspiracy, but the glove and the letter, they may be traps, set to mislead. Japp scratched his head. So, Roger's trying to sell the diamond through Grayson? Or is Grayson lying to save his skin? Poirot smiled faintly. Both are possible, but neither is certain. We must dig deeper. The glove, the letter, the clink, they point to a jeweler's hand, but whose? And why? Poirot returned to the drawing room, his mind a whirl of new connections. Roger's approach to Grayson suggested a motive, debts, perhaps gambling, that drove him to plan the theft. But Madame Isabella and Wentworth's garden conversation implied they too had a scheme, foiled by an earlier theft. Was Roger the mastermind, outwitting his partners? Or was Grayson lying, using Roger as a scapegoat? The glove's polish was a jeweler's tool, but it could belong to anyone with access to such materials. Grayson or even a staff member like Collins, whose trembling hands hinted at more than loyalty. He paced the room, his polished shoes clicking. On the floor, his thoughts turning to the other suspects. Lady Evelyn's key, never out of her sight yet vulnerable in a crowded room. Madame Isabella's conspiracy, betrayed by an empty case. Lord Harold's resentment, his alibi shaken by Clara's sighting. Wentworth's secrecy, his military, precision a perfect cover, Clara's nervous honesty now an ally, Mrs. Harrow's stern silence, a wall hiding unknown motives. The curse dismissed by Poirot lingered as a motive. Fear or greed could drive someone to steal the diamond, to break its supposed hold or profit from its legend. Poirot stopped, his eyes falling on a portrait above the fireplace. Sir Reginald, Ashbourne, the diamond's first owner, whose death began the curse. The painting's stern gaze seemed to challenge him, as if guarding the manor's secrets. Poirot's mind flashed to Clara, his unexpected ally, whose glove had shifted the case. Her courage, her observation of a figure moving toward the French doors suggested the thief's escape route or a staged distraction. The letters G and the glove's polish pointed to Grayson, but Roger's involvement added a new layer. The truth was close, but it was buried beneath layers of deception. He made his way to the library where the letter had been found, its shelves a silent repository of secrets. The candelabrum on the oak table cast a soft glow, and Poirot examined the desk again, searching for further traces of the letter's origin. He found nothing new, but the act steadied his thoughts, grounding him in the methodical process he trusted. The glove, the letter, the clink, the garden, all were pieces of a puzzle, and Roger's name now loomed large, a thread connecting Grayson's fear to Madame Isabella's betrayal. As the clock struck 2, Poirot returned to the drawing room, his resolve hardening. The star of Seraphine was out there, hidden by a cunning mind, but Clara's glove and Grayson's confession had brought him closer. The jeweler's secret was a crack in the thief's armor, and Poirot would widen it until the truth spilled forth. The manor's shadows were deep, but Hercule Poirot's little gray cells shone brighter, and the diamond would not elude him for long. Chapter 11. A shocking revelation. The night at Ashbourne Manor had deepened into a suffocating stillness, the grandeur of its halls now a backdrop for suspicion and unease. The drawing room, with its crimson drapes and stern ancestral portraits, flickered under the dim glow of candelabras, their flames casting long shadows that seemed to writhe with the manor's secrets. Hercule Poirot stood near the fireplace, his small frame impeccable in his tailored suit, his hands clasped behind his back. His sharp eyes, framed by the precise curve of his mustache, were half closed, his mind a whirlwind of clues. The stolen star of Seraphine, vanished from a locked case. Clara's clink of metal, the torn letter signed G, the garden rendezvous between Madame Isabella and Captain Wentworth, Roger's mocking laugh, the curse haunting the diamond's history, the black leather glove stained with jewelers, Alish, and now Mr. Grayson's confession that Roger Ashbourne had approached him about selling a gem. Each clue was a thread in a tapestry of deception, and Poirot's little gray cells were weaving them together with relentless precision. The manor was a gilded prison, its occupants confined by Inspector Japp's constables, their alibis, a tangled web of half-truths and contradictions. Grayson's revelation had cast Roger in a new light, suggesting he had planned the theft to clear debts, perhaps in collusion with Madame Isabella and Wentworth, whose garden conversation revealed a failed conspiracy, but the diamond's absence before their plan could unfold hinted at a rival thief, someone who had outwitted them all. Clara, now Poirot's unexpected ally, had provided the glove, a tangible clue pointing to a jeweler's hand, yet its placement, near the French door, suggested an escape or a distraction. The curse, dismissed by Poirot as superstition, lingered as a motive. Fear or greed could drive someone to steal the diamond, to break its supposed hold or profit from its legend. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a commotion in the corridor. Raised voices echoed sharp and urgent, followed by the heavy tread of Japp's constables. He moved swiftly, his polished shoes clicking on the marble floor as he followed the sound to the interrogation parlor, a small room off the main hall, its walls lined with books and a single table illuminated by a candelabrum. Japp stood at the center, his round face flushed with excitement, holding a folded piece of paper. Beside him, a constable restrained a flustered Mr. Collins, the butler, whose trembling hands were more pronounced than ever. "Poirot," Japp exclaimed, his voice a mix of triumph and disbelief. "You won't believe this. One of my men found it in the servants' quarters tucked in Collins's coat pocket. It's a report from Scotland Yard about Madame Isabella Valenti. She's got a past, and it's not pretty." Poirot's eyes gleamed as he took the paper, his gloved fingers, unfolding it with care. The document was brief but damning. A confidential file detailing Madame Isabella's history, not just as an opera singer but as a figure linked to an international smuggling ring. Her performances across Europe had served as a cover for moving stolen goods, jewels, art, antiquities, through a network of discreet buyers. The report noted her charm, her connections to powerful men, and a recent investigation that had come close to exposing her, only for her to slip away. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his voice soft but resonant. "Madame Isabella, she is no mere songbird, no? She sings a dangerous tune." Japp nodded, his eyes wide. "And it gets better. Collins here was trying to hide this, caught him slipping it into a drawer when we searched his room." "What's your game, Collins?" The butler's face was ashen, his hands shaking as he struggled against the constable's grip. I didn't know what it was, sir. I found it in the library earlier today, and I thought it was private correspondence. I meant to give it to Lady Evelyn." Poirot's mustache twitched, his gaze piercing. "Monsieur Collins, you are a man of loyalty, oui? Yet you hide a document that reveals Madame Isabella's secrets. Why?" Collins swallowed, his eyes darting to the floor. I was afraid, sir. Madame Isabella, she's been kind to the staff, slipping us extra coins, charming us with her stories. I didn't want to cause trouble for her, not without knowing what it meant." Poirot leaned closer, his voice soft but unrelenting. "And yet trouble has found us all. This document, it changes everything. Madame Isabella, she is a smuggler, perhaps a thief planning to take the Star of Seraphine for her network. But someone else, they took it first. Tell me, monsieur, did you see her near the case? Or perhaps with Monsieur Roger?" Collins shook, his head, his voice trembling. "No, sir. I was busy with the staff, keeping things in order. I saw her dancing with Mr. Roger, but not near the case." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The report confirmed Madame Isabella's involvement in a larger scheme, likely the plan she and Wentworth had discussed in the garden. but the diamond's prior theft suggested they were outmaneuvered, perhaps by Roger, whose approach to Grayson hinted at a separate plot. The glove, with its jeweler's polish, still pointed to Grayson, but the letters G could be a plant, a distraction to shift blame. Clara's sighting of a figure moving toward the French doors added another layer. Someone had acted, swiftly perhaps to pass the diamond or to escape suspicion. Poirot turned to Jap. Mon ami, this revelation is most illuminating. Madame Isabella, she is a key player but not the only one. We must confront her and Monsieur Roger to see how their stories bend under pressure. Jap grinned, his notebook flapping. Right. Let's haul them in. I want to see that singer. Squirm. Poirot raised a hand, his tone calm but firm. Patience, Inspector. The truth, it is like a fine wine. It must be savored, not rushed. Let us bring them to the drawing room with the others and observe their reactions. The guilty, they reveal themselves in the presence of their accomplices. Jap nodded, barking orders to the constables. Within minutes, the suspects were summoned. To the drawing room, their faces a mix of weariness and wariness. Lady Evelyn sat in her high-backed chair, her sapphire gown creased, her fan idle in her lap. Roger stood near the fireplace, his charming smile strained, his hands in his pockets. Madame Isabella reclined on a chaise-longue, her crimson gown a vivid contrast to the room's muted tones, her ruby-adorned chignon gleaming. Lord Harold stood by a bookcase, his silver hair catching the firelight, his scowl deeper than ever. Mr. Grayson hovered near a window, his thin frame trembling, his eyes darting to Poirot. Captain Wentworth leaned on his cane near the French doors, his weathered face impassive. Clara stood at the room's edge, her apron crumpled, her eyes wide with nervous anticipation. Collins and Mrs. Harrow, the housekeeper, lingered near the door, their faces pale and guarded. Poirot stepped forward, the Scotland Yard report in his hand, his voice commanding the room's attention. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his eyes sweeping over the suspects. The theft of the Star of Seraphine is a crime of cunning, but no crime is perfect. Tonight we have uncovered a truth most shocking. Madame Isabella Valenti, you are not merely an opera singer, no. You are linked to a smuggling ring, a network that trades in stolen treasures. The diamond, it was your target, was it not? The room erupted in gasps, the suspects' faces a study in shock and calculation. Madame Isabella's smile froze, her eyes flashing with defiance. Monsieur Poirot, this is outrageous. I am an artist, not a criminal. That report, it's slander. Poirot held up the paper, his voice unrelenting. Slander does not come from Scotland Yard, madame. You and Captain Wentworth, you spoke in the garden of a plan gone wrong, a diamond already taken. You conspired to steal it, but someone else was faster, we? Wentworth's knuckles whitened on his cane, his voice gruff. You've got it. Wrong, Poirot. I'm no thief. Whatever Isabella's mixed up in, I was only helping a friend. Roger laughed, a sharp, nervous sound that echoed his garden mockery. Helping a friend, Wentworth? Or helping yourself? You're all pointing fingers, but I had nothing to do with this. Poirot's eyes narrowed, turning to Roger. Monsieur Roger, you are most vocal, yet you approached Monsieur Grayson about selling a gem, a hypothetical gem, he says. Your debts, they are no secret. Did you plan to take the star, perhaps with Madame Isabella, only to find it gone? Roger's face paled, his hands clenching. I told you it was just talk. I'd never betray Aunt Evelyn. Lady Evelyn's fan snapped shut, her voice trembling. Roger, is this true? Did you plan to sell the star? Before Roger could respond, Lord Harold stepped forward, his scowl fierce. Enough of this. Evelyn, you've let this manor become a den of vipers. I told you to sell that cursed diamond years ago. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. The curse, it is a myth, but greed is real. Madame Isabella, Monsieur Roger, you are entangled in this web. But the diamond's absence suggests a third hand, a thief who outwitted you both. The glove, the letter, the clink, they point to a plan within a plan. Hercule Poirot will find the truth. The suspects shifted uneasily, their eyes darting to one another. Clara's hands twisted in her apron, her gaze fixed on Poirot, a silent pledge of loyalty. Grayson's fingers twitched, his face pale with fear. Wentworth's cane tapped the floor, a rhythm of restraint. Collins and Mrs. Harrow stood silent, their faces masks of unease. Japp clapped his hands, his voice booming. "Right, back to your rooms, all of you. We'll sort this out come morning. Poirot, what's next?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "We watch, M.A." Chapter 12. The trap is set. The night at Ashbourne Manor had grown oppressive, the air thick with the weight of secrets and the faint hum of suspicion that seemed to emanate from the very walls. The drawing room, its crimson drapes drawn tight against the encroaching dawn, flickered under the dim glow of candelabras, their flames casting restless shadows across the ancestral portraits. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small frame impeccable in his tailored suit, his hands clasped behind his back. His sharp eyes, framed by the precise curve of his mustache, gleamed with the intensity of a man on the cusp of unraveling a great mystery. His little gray cells were ablaze, weaving together the threads of the case. The stolen star of Seraphine vanished from a locked case. Clara's clink of metal, the torn letter signed G, the garden rendezvous between Madame Isabella and Captain Wentworth, Roger's mocking laugh, the curse haunting the diamond's history, the black leather glove stained with jeweler's polish, and the shocking revelation of Madame Isabella's ties to an international smuggling ring. Each clue was a piece of a puzzle, and Poirot was ready to set a trap to reveal the thief. The manor was a gilded prison, its occupants confined by Inspector Japp's constables, their alibis a tangled web of contradictions. Madame Isabella and Wentworth's failed conspiracy, Roger's approach to Grayson about selling a gem, and the glove's link to a jeweler's hand suggested a complex plot, with a rival thief outwitting them all. Clara, Poirot's unexpected ally, had provided the glove and her observation of a figure moving toward the French doors, adding a new layer to the mystery. The Scotland Yard report on Madame Isabella had cracked the case open, exposing her criminal past and her likely intent to steal the diamond for her smuggling network. Yet the diamond's prior disappearance pointed to another hand, perhaps Roger driven by debts, or Grayson, despite his denials, or even a staff member like Collins or Mrs. Harrow, whose access to the manor's secrets made them dangerous wildcards. Poirot's mind was a whirl of possibilities, but he knew that the truth often revealed itself under pressure. The suspects were rattled, their facades crumbling after the confrontation in the drawing room. Roger's nervous denial, Madame Isabella's defiant composure, Wentworth's guarded silence, Grayson's trembling fear, Lord Harold's angry outburst, and Lady Evelyn's quiet despair. All were signs of a house on the brink. The time had come to force the thief's hand, to lure them into a mistake that would expose their guilt. Poirot had a plan, a ruse, a trap, as elegant as the crime itself. He turned to Japp, who was pacing near the fireplace, his notebook worn from hours of scribbling. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice calm but commanding. "We have stirred the hornet's nest, Now we must draw the thief into the open. I propose a deception, a second gala, to be announced at once, with a new diamond on display." Jappy stopped, his round face creased with confusion. "A second gala? Poirot, it's 3 a.m. And what diamond? The star's gone." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Not the star, Inspector, but a duplicate, a glass replica, convincing enough to fool all but the keenest eye. We shall say it was found in the manor, perhaps dropped by the thief in haste. The guilty one they will act, either to steal it again, or to reveal their knowledge of the true diamond's fate." Japp's eyes widened, his skepticism giving way to admiration. "Blimey, Poirot, that's clever, but where'll we get a fake diamond at this hour?" Poirot gestured toward the door. "Monsieur Grayson, he is a jeweler, no? He will assist us willingly or not. And Lady Evelyn, she will lend her support for the sake of her family's honor." Japp nodded, his grin returning. "Right, let's do it. I'll get the constables to spread the word. Quietly, mind you. We don't want the thief bolting. Poirot inclined his head. Précisément. And you, Mademoiselle Clara? He turned to the maid, who hovered near the door, her apron crumpled, her eyes wide with nervous anticipation. You will be my eyes, oui? Watch the suspects. Note their reactions when the announcement is made. Clara nodded, her face resolute despite her fear. Yes, sir, I'll do my best. Within the hour, the plan was set. Grayson, summoned to the parlor, was pale and trembling but agreed to craft a replica from glass, using his tools and a detailed description of the star's cut provided by Lady Evelyn. The process was swift, his jeweler's hand steady despite his fear, and by 4 o'clock, a convincing facsimile gleamed on a velvet cushion, its facets catching the candlelight in a pale imitation of the true gem. Lady Evelyn, though weary, approved the ruse, her resolve hardened by the betrayal she sensed among her guests. At Poirot's instruction, Japp gathered the suspects in the ballroom, its chandeliers now dimmed, the empty pedestal a stark reminder of the crime. The guests, roused from their rooms, were bleary-eyed but alert, their faces a mix of curiosity and unease. Roger stood near the musician's platform, his hands in his pockets, his smile strained. Madame Isabella reclined against a column, her crimson gown vivid in the dim light, her ruby-adorned chignon gleaming. Lord Harold scowled by the fireplace, his brandy glass empty. Grayson hovered near the pedestal, his fingers twitching as he avoided Poirot's gaze. Wentworth leaned on his cane by the French doors, his weathered face impassive. Clara moved among the staff, her tray of tea trembling slightly, her eyes darting to Poirot for reassurance. Collins and Mrs. Harrow stood at the room's edge. There, faces pale and guarded, Poirot stepped forward, the glass replica in a new case on the pedestal, its lock gleaming under the chandelier light. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice carrying the weight of authority. The star of Seraphine, it seems, was not lost to us. This evening, during our search, we found a diamond, dropped perhaps by the thief in their haste. It is here before you, and tonight we shall celebrate its return with a second gala. The room erupted in murmurs, the suspect's reactions a study in calculation. Roger's smile faltered, his eyes flicking to Madame Isabella, who raised an eyebrow, her lips curving faintly. Lord Harold's scowl deepened, his fingers tightening on his glass. Grayson's face paled, his hands clenching as he stared at the case. Wentworth's cane tapped the floor, a slow, deliberate rhythm. Clara, serving tea, noted Madame Isabella's glance at Roger, a silent communication that Poirot caught from the corner of his eye. Lady Evelyn, standing beside Poirot, played her part, her voice trembling but resolute. I am overjoyed to have the star returned. Let us celebrate and put this terrible night behind us. The announcement was a spark in a powder keg. Poirot watched closely, his eyes scanning every face, every gesture. The thief, he knew, would act, either to steal the replica, believing it real, or to expose their knowledge that the true diamond was elsewhere. The trap was set, and the manor's shadows were about to yield their secrets. As the guests dispersed, to prepare for the impromptu gala, Poirot moved to the French doors, his mind racing. The replica was a lure, but the true diamond's fate was still a mystery. The glove, the letter, the clink, the garden conspiracy, all pointed to a plan within a plan. Roger's approach to Grayson suggested he had intended to sell the star, perhaps with Madame Isabella's smuggling network as the buyer. But their plan had failed, the diamond taken by another, someone with access, cunning, and motive. The glove's polish implicated Grayson, but its placement near the doors suggested a staff member or a guest like Wentworth, whose military precision could orchestrate such a theft. Poirot slipped into the garden, the cool night air a contrast to the stifling ballroom. The paths wound through hedges and rosebeds, their shadows deep under the sliver of moon. He retraced the route to the gazebo where Madame Isabella and Wentworth had met, searching for any trace, a footprint, a dropped item, a mark in the earth. He found nothing, but the memory of Roger's laugh lingered, a taunt that suggested he held the key. Returning to the ballroom, Poirot found Japp organizing the constables, their eyes on the replica case. "We've got men at every exit," Japp said, his voice low. "If anyone tries for that fake diamond, we'll nab them." Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. "And Clara, she watches the suspects. The guilty one, they will betray themselves, by action or by inaction." The gala began at 5, a muted affair compared to the earlier splendor. The quartet played softly, the guests danced with forced gaiety, and the replica gleamed in its case, a beacon drawing every eye. Poirot moved among them, his presence both comforting and unnerving. He noted Roger's whispered exchange with Madame Isabella, their heads close, their eyes darting to the case. Lord Harold stood alone, his scowl fixed on the replica, his brandy glass refilled. Grayson lingered near the pedestal, his fingers twitching, his face pale with fear or guilt. Wentworth watched from the French doors, his cane still, his gaze steady but intense. Clara approached, her tray steady now, her voice a whisper. "Monsieur Poirot, I saw Captain Wentworth touch the lock on the case just now when he thought no one was looking. And Mr. Roger, he's been circling it like a hawk." Poirot's heart quickened. "Merci, mademoiselle. You are invaluable. Keep watching." As the music swelled, Poirot positioned himself near the case, his eyes scanning the room. The trap was working. The suspects were restless, their nerves fraying. Then, a sudden movement caught his eye. Wentworth, his cane tapping. Chapter 13. The Thief Unmasked. The ballroom of Ashbourne Manor, once a stage for elegance and revelry, now pulsed with a taut silence, broken only by the faint crackle of candelabras and the soft shuffle of nervous feet. The chandeliers, dimmed to a ghostly glow, cast flickering shadows across the marble floor where the pedestal stood, its glass case holding a gleaming but false diamond, a trap set by Hercule Poirot to lure the thief of the Star of Seraphine. The air was thick with anticipation, the suspects frozen in their places, their faces a gallery of shock, fear, and calculation. Poirot stood at the center, his small frame commanding the room, his tailored suit impeccable, his mustache a precise curve framing sharp eyes that missed nothing. His little gray cells were at their peak, weaving together the threads of a case that had consumed the night. The diamonds vanishing from a locked case, Clara's clink of metal, the torn letter signed G, the garden rendezvous between Madame Isabella and Captain Wentworth, Roger's mocking laugh, the curse haunting the gem's history, the black leather glove stained with jeweler's polish, Madame Isabella's smuggling past, and Roger's desperate approach to Grayson. Now, with Captain Wentworth caught with a jeweler's pick and Roger poised at the French doors, the trap had sprung, and the truth was within reach. The suspects, Lady Evelyn, Roger, Madame Isabella, Lord Harold, Grayson, Wentworth, Clara, Collins, and Mrs. Harrow, stood in a loose semicircle around the pedestal, their eyes darting between Poirot and the constables flanking Wentworth and Roger. Inspector Japp, his round face flushed with triumph, held the jeweler's pick aloft, its glint a damning accusation. "Got you, Wentworth," he bellowed, his voice echoing off the walls. "And you, Roger, trying to slip out, eh? What's the game?" Poirot raised a hand, his gesture silencing the room. "Patience, mon ami," he said, his voice calm but resonant. "The game, it is complex, but the truth, it is simple. Mesdames et messieurs, the Star of Seraphine was stolen not by force but by cunning, a plan within a plan, a thief among thieves. Tonight, we have seen actions that betray the guilty, but let us unravel the web, we?" He stepped toward Wentworth, whose weathered face was set in a mask of defiance, his knuckles white on his cane despite the constable's grip. "Captain Wentworth," Poirot began, his eyes piercing, "you are a man of strategy, trained in the art of war. This pick, it is a jeweler's tool, non? You reached for the lock, believing the diamond real. Why?" Wentworth's jaw tightened, his voice gruff but steady. "I was testing the lock, Poirot. Nothing more. I'm no thief, just curious about your little charade." Poirot's mustache twitched. Curious or desperate? In the garden, you spoke with Madame Isabella of a plan gone wrong, a diamond, already taken. You conspired to steal it, oui? But someone else was faster. Madame Isabella, her crimson gown vivid against the dim light, stepped forward, her ruby-adorned chignon gleaming. Monsieur Poirot, you twist words. I am no thief, and Captain Wentworth is my friend, not a criminal. Your accusations are baseless. Poirot turned to her, his gaze unrelenting. Baseless, madame. The Scotland Yard report says otherwise. You are a smuggler linked to a network that trades in stolen jewels. The Star, it was your prize to be sold through your contacts, no? But the case was empty before you could act. Her eyes flashed, but her composure held. I know nothing of smuggling, monsieur. I'm an artist wronged by slander. Poirot nodded, his expression neutral, and turned to Roger, who stood rigid by the French doors, his charming smile gone, his hands clenched. Monsieur Roger, you were swift to reach these doors where the key hangs for the staff. An escape, perhaps, or a rendezvous. You approached Monsieur Grayson to sell a gem, and in the garden, your laugh mocked those who sought the diamond. You know more than you admit, oui? Roger's face paled, his voice strained. I told you it was just talk with Grayson. I needed money, yes, but I didn't steal the diamond. I was trying to protect Aunt Evelyn. Lady Evelyn, seated in a velvet chair, her sapphire gown creased, gasped softly, her fan trembling, in her lap. Roger, what have you done? Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. Madame, your nephew is entangled, but let us see how deep. Monsieur Grayson, he turned to the jeweler, who hovered near the pedestal, his thin frame trembling. You spoke of Roger's offer and this glove. He produced the black leather glove, its polish glinting, was found near the case, stained with a jeweler's tool. Is it yours? Grayson shook his head, his voice high and desperate. No, Monsieur Poirot. I swear it's not mine. Someone's framing me. The letter, the glove, all of it. Poirot nodded, tucking the glove, away, his mind racing. The glove, the letter, the pick, the garden, all pointed to a conspiracy, but the diamond's absence suggested a mastermind who had outplayed them all. Clara, standing at the room's edge, her apron crumpled, caught Poirot's eye, her nervous nod confirming she had seen nothing new but was ready to watch. Her earlier sighting of a figure moving toward the doors lingered in Poirot's mind, a clue to the thief's escape or a staged distraction. He paced slowly, his polished shoes clicking on the marble, his voice rising to address the room. The Star of Seraphine, it is a jewel of desire, and desire breeds deception. Let us reconstruct the crime, oui? The case was locked, the key with Madame Evelyn, yet the diamond vanished without a trace. Clara heard a clink, like metal on metal, near the case, a tool perhaps, or a mechanism. The glove, with its polish, suggests a jeweler's hand, but it was near the French doors, hinting at escape. The letter, signed G, speaks of a garden meeting, yet Monsieur Grayson denies it. Madame Isabella and Captain Wentworth planned to steal the diamond but found it gone. Monsieur Roger, he sought to sell it, yet claims innocence. And the curse, bah, a myth, but one that fuels fear and greed. He stopped, his eyes sweeping the suspects. The thief. They are among us, and they are clever. But no one is cleverer than Hercule Poirot. The trap, it has revealed your actions, and now I see the truth. The room held its breath, the suspects' faces a study in tension. Poirot turned to Collins, the butler, who stood pale and trembling near the door. Monsieur Collins, you locked the case, oui? You swore it was. Secure, yet your hands they shake. Why? Collins swallowed, his voice barely audible. I did my duty, sir. I locked it, as Lady Evelyn instructed. I know nothing of the theft. Poirot's gaze was piercing. And yet you hid a report on Madame Isabella, found in your coat. A loyal butler or a man with secrets? Collins' knees buckled, but he steadied himself. I found it, sir, in the library. I meant to give it to Lady Evelyn, I swear. Poirot nodded, his eyes flicking to Mrs. Harrow, the housekeeper, whose stern face was a mask of composure. And you, Madame Harrow, you were in the kitchens, your alibi confirmed by the staff. Yet your silence, it is loud, non? You know this manor's secrets, its passages, its routines. Mrs. Harrow's lips tightened. I know my place, monsieur. I saw nothing, heard nothing. Poirot's mustache twitched, his mind seizing a detail. The manor's passages, hidden routes used by staff known to Collins and Mrs. Harrow, perhaps to others. He turned to Clara, his voice gentle. Mademoiselle Clara, you saw a figure move toward the French doors after the clink. Was it Monsieur Roger or another? Clara hesitated, her hands twisting in her apron. It was too fast, sir. I thought it was Mr. Roger, but it could have been someone else. Taller, maybe, like Captain Wentworth. Wentworth's cane tapped sharply, his voice gruff. Don't drag me into this, girl. I was by the doors, yes, but I didn't move toward them. Poirot's eyes gleamed, a sudden clarity dawning. The passages, the glove, the clink, the doors, all converged on a single truth. He stepped toward the pedestal, his voice rising. The star was not stolen from the case in the ballroom. No, it was taken earlier, before the gala, when the case was locked in the preparation room. The clink, it was a distraction, a sound to make us believe the theft occurred at that moment. The glove, it was planted to implicate Grayson. The letter, it was a ruse to sow confusion. And the garden, it was a stage for a meeting that never happened. The suspects gasped, their eyes wide. Lady Evelyn's fan fell to the floor, her voice trembling. Before the gala? But how? Poirot turned to Collins, his voice a velvet blade. Monsieur Collins, you locked the case in the preparation room. Oui? You alone had access before it was carried to the ballroom under guard. But you did not lock it, did you? You took the diamond, replaced it with a false stone, a glass perhaps, to fool the eye until the gala began. You then planted the glove, the letter, the clink, to mislead us to point to others. Collins staggered, his face ashen, his hands shaking violently. No, sir, I would never betray you. Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. You betrayed, monsieur, because you believed in the curse. You heard the stories, whispered among the staff, of ruin and loss. You thought to save Lady Evelyn or perhaps to profit for yourself. You hid the star, planning to retrieve it later after the chaos had passed. Collins collapsed to his knees, sobbing. I did it for her. The diamond, it's cursed. I saw what it did to Sir Reginald, to the family. I hid it in the servants' quarters to keep it safe. I meant to destroy it. Japp's constables rushed forward, seizing See Fear, Madame, it dry. Chapter 14. Echoes of the Star. The dawn light crept through the heavy crimson drapes of Ashbourne Manor, casting a pale glow across the drawing room where the drama of the stolen star of Seraphine had unfolded. The candelabras, now burned low, flickered faintly, their dying flames a testament to the long night of suspicion and revelation. The ancestral portraits, stern and silent, seemed to soften in the morning's embrace, as if acknowledging the truth Hercule Poirot had uncovered. Poirot himself stood by a tall window, his small frame impeccable in his tailored suit, his hands clasped behind his back. His sharp eyes, framed by the precise curve of his mustache, gazed out at the gardens, their hedges and rosebeds now bathed in a soft mist. His little gray cells were still alight, reflecting on the case that had tested his intellect. The diamond's theft from a locked case, Clara's clink of metal, the torn letter signed G, the garden rendezvous, Roger's mocking laugh, the curse's shadow, the jeweler's glove, Madame Isabella's smuggling past, and the shocking unmasking of Mr. Collins, the butler, as the thief driven by fear of a curse. The manor was no longer a gilded prison, its occupants freed from the weight of suspicion, though the echoes of the crime lingered. The star of Seraphine, recovered from a false panel in the servants' quarters, gleamed once more in its case, its brilliance a silent witness to the greed and fear it had inspired. Inspector Japp, his round face weary but triumphant, had overseen Collins's removal, the butler's sobs fading into the night. The suspects, Lady Evelyn, Roger, Madame Isabella, Lord Harold, Grayson, Wentworth, Clara, and Mrs. Harrow, had dispersed to their rooms, their relief tempered by the sting of betrayal. Clara, Poirot's unexpected ally, had proven invaluable, her courage and observations guiding him to the truth. Yet Poirot sensed the case was not fully closed. There were echoes, loose threads, hidden motives that demanded his attention before he could declare the mystery resolved. He turned from the window, his polished shoes clicking softly on the marble floor as he crossed the drawing room to a velvet chair near the fireplace. The embers were cold now, but the room retained the tension of the night's confrontations. Poirot sat, his posture impeccable, his mind replaying the events. Collins's confession had been a shock, his fear of the diamond's curse driving him to steal it, not for profit but to protect Lady Evelyn from its supposed ruin. He had replaced the star with a glass replica in the preparation room, planted the glove and letter to implicate Grayson, and staged the clink, a dropped spoon perhaps, to suggest the theft occurred during the gala. It was a plan of surprising. Cunning for a loyal servant, yet it crumbled under Poirot's scrutiny, the butler's trembling hands and hidden report betraying his guilt. But Poirot's little gray cells were restless. Collins's motive, rooted in superstition, was clear, but his actions suggested a deeper knowledge of the manor's secrets, passages, routines, and perhaps the plans of others. Madame Isabella and Wentworth's garden conspiracy, Roger's approach to Grayson, and the glove's precise placement hinted at a web of overlapping schemes. Had Collins acted alone, or was he a pawn in a larger game manipulated by another? The letters G, the glove's polish, and Clara's sighting of a figure by the French doors suggested a second hand, someone who knew of Collins' plan and used it to their advantage. Poirot rose, his mind fixed on the preparation room where the theft had occurred. He made his way through the silent corridors, their tapestries and gilded mirrors reflecting the dawn's faint light. The preparation room, a small chamber off the ballroom used for staging the gala's displays, was unassuming. Plain walls, a wooden table, a single window overlooking the gardens. The case had been locked here by Collins, under Lady Evelyn's supervision, before being carried to the ballroom under guard. Poirot examined the room, his gloved hands probing for clues, a scratch on the table, a mark on the floor, a trace of polish. He found a faint smudge on the window's latch, metallic and glossy, matching the glove's residue. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, his eyes gleaming. The polish, it is here too. The window, perhaps an entry, or an exit. The latch was loose, suggesting it had been opened recently, though the window was too high for easy access without a ladder. He stepped outside, following the wall to the garden below, where the rosebeds were soft and undisturbed. But a single thorn, caught on a low shrub, gleamed with a trace of crimson thread. Silk, like Madame Isabella's gown. Poirot's heart quickened. The thread was a whisper of a clue, linking the preparation room to the garden, to Madame Isabella's conspiracy. Had she been here, before the gala, aiding Collins or spying on him? Or was the thread a plant, like the glove to shift blame? He tucked the thorn into his waistcoat pocket, alongside the letter and glove, and returned to the manor, his mind racing. The echoes of the crime were growing louder, and the truth was not yet fully sung. He found Jap in the interrogation parlor, sorting through his notebook, his face creased with exhaustion. "Poirot!" Jap exclaimed, his voice a mix of relief and curiosity. "Thought you'd be resting after nabbing Collins. What's got you prowling?" Poirot smiled faintly, his eyes twinkling. "Rest, mon ami, is for those who believe a case is closed. But this one, it has echoes, details that hum like a string plucked in the night. I have found a trace of polish on the preparation room's window, and a thread in the garden, crimson like Madame Isabella's gown." Jap's eyes widened. "Blimey, you think she's mixed up in it after all? Or is it another of Collins's tricks?" Poirot clasped his hands behind his back. "Perhaps both, perhaps neither. Collins, he stole the diamond, oui, but his plan, it was too precise for a man driven by fear alone. Someone guided him or used him. We must speak with Madame Isabella and with Clara, who sees what others miss." Jap nodded, barking orders to a constable to fetch the suspects. Within minutes, Madame Isabella swept into the parlor, her crimson gown replaced by a simpler black dress, her ruby-adorned chignon now loose, framing her face with dark curls. Her smile was composed, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Clara followed, her apron freshly pressed, her face pale but resolute, her loyalty to Poirot unwavering. "Madame Isabella," Poirot began, his voice calm but piercing. "You are a woman of many talents, no? An opera singer, a smuggler, a conspirator. In the garden, you spoke of a plan gone wrong with Captain Wentworth. But I wonder, did your plan begin earlier, in the preparation room, where a window bears the trace of a jeweler's polish, and a garden shrub holds a thread from a crimson gown?" Her smile froze, her hands clenching. "Monsieur Poirot, you weave fantasies. I was in the ballroom dancing, charming guests. I know nothing of windows or threads." Poirot produced the thorn, its crimson thread glinting in the candlelight. "This, madame, was found below the preparation room. It matches your gown from the gala, no? And you, a smuggler, you know the value of a diamond like the star." Madame Isabella's eyes flashed, her voice sharp. "A thread proves nothing. I walked in the garden, yes, but not to steal. You accuse without evidence." Poirot nodded, his gaze unrelenting. "Evidence, madame, is in the details. And you, Mademoiselle Clara?" He turned to the maid, his voice gentle. "You saw a figure by the French doors after the clink. Could it have been Madame Isabella, perhaps moving swiftly?" Clara hesitated, her hands twisting in her apron. I'm not sure, sir. It was too fast, but the figure was tall, graceful, like Madame Isabella might be." Madame Isabella laughed, a brittle sound. "A maid's guess? This is your proof, Poirot?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "Not proof, madame, but a note in the symphony of truth. Let us speak with Monsieur Roger, who laughed in the garden and whose debts drove him to approach Grayson." Roger was summoned, his charming smile gone, his face pale and drawn. He stood rigid, his hands in his pockets, his eyes darting to Madame Isabella. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice strained, "I've told you I didn't steal the diamond. Collins did. Your trap proved it." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Oui, Collins stole it. But your laugh, monsieur, it was knowing, mocking. You approached Grayson to sell a gem, and you whispered with Madame Isabella in the garden. Were you her partner, perhaps using Collins as a pawn?" Roger's jaw tightened. I was desperate, yes. I owe money more than I can pay. Isabella, she said she knew buyers, discreet ones. We talked about taking the diamond, but we never did. Collins beat us to it." Madame Isabella's face paled, her composure cracking. "Roger, you fool! Keep silent." Poirot's eyes gleamed, a sudden clarity dawning. "Mon Dieu, the truth, it sings at last. Madame Isabella, you and Roger planned to steal the star, using your smuggling network to sell it. But Collins, he overheard you perhaps in the library where you left the letter. Driven by fear of the curse, he acted first, taking the diamond to protect Lady Evelyn. You, madame, you saw him in the preparation room through the window and left the thread in your haste. The glove, the letter, they were his attempts to shift blame. But your plan, it set the stage. The room fell silent. The suspects' faces, a study in shock. Madame Isabella's shoulders slumped, her voice low. You are relentless, Monsieur Poirot. Yes, I planned to take the diamond with Roger's help. But Collins, he was a shadow, always listening. I saw him in the preparation room locking the case, but I didn't know he'd take Aunt Evelyn. I was desperate.